Із Америки приїхав наш надійний побратим, познайомтеся із ним. В росіян зі сраки дим. Ла-ла-ла-ла. За ракетою ракету на паскудних ворогів випускає весь наш гнів. Робить все без зайвих слів. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Московити зі снарядами гребуться на складах, коли робить свій бабах. Наганяє лютий страх. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Розробляють окупанти свої плани у штабах, але чути знов бабах. Лупить нечисть по зубах. Ла-ла-ла-ла-ла. Окупанти лиш заповнили склади своїм пальним, як вітається із ним. Підіймає чорний дим. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Не любити московитів і довести нелюбов помагає знов і знов. Найточніший орколов. Ла-ла-ла-ла. 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 Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome back to day 153 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, welcome back, everyone, after our Monday break. It was a wonderful little Monday break, but it's good to be back, and we came back just in time because massive news has come out of the Kherson area, letting us know that the Russians have run out of time, and things are about to get very nasty and very bad for them there. Of course, kind of like the title and the thumbnail suggests. But before we get to that today, we, of course, have to make a special announcement. I checked Sunday night's fundraiser after it went off air that night, and we had raised a total of $8.4 thousand in support of Ukraine, which would bring our total over $370,000. Now, we haven't done the exact calculations on how high and how far over it is yet, but we are only less than $20,000 away from reaching $400,000 total raised for nonprofits operating in Ukraine. And if y'all don't think that's impressive, I think that's impressive. And all I heard from Matthew was a little "ha." We didn't hear the "ye." And so could you get away from... Yeah, there we go. And so we have definitely made it incredibly far with the fundraisers. And I got to thank you all once again, every single East Spring Army member, for doing that and helping us to get so far. If it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't have been able to raise this figure for Ukraine, and of course, it's something I'm incredibly proud of. Another thing I'm proud of, and I just want to make this a mention just in case we have new viewers who somehow watch this stream, all of our fundraisers are run through the YouTube Give system. The YouTube Give system is operated by the YouTube company, and how it works is that YouTube creators like me are able to go on there and pick a fundraiser that's under the GuideStar program, which is a organization that pretty much vets nonprofits and makes sure that they're official and that they're safe to fundraise for. YouTube then allows us to fundraise for them. They attach that fundraiser to our stream where you can click a donate button, and then all of that money that you put into it is then taken and put into an account completely managed by YouTube, totally out of our control. And then after the fundraiser ends and a little bit of time passes, YouTube does all of the accounting, all of the figure collecting, and then they send all of that money to the nonprofit of choice, making sure that there is as little a scam as possible. And we're always going to run our fundraisers that way because we want to make sure that everyone's safe. I once again highly suggest that in case if you do not know who a fundraiser or an organization is with, and they're just saying that money's going to go to Ukraine, or they're like, hey, I'm in the US, buy me a $20,000 drone, I usually stay away from those because there's no way to know if they're real or not. And the unfortunate truth is that there's always people out there trying to scam. And so we always make sure that we're as safe as possible. And I hope y'all enjoy that. And I hope that we're able to go even further in the amount that we are able to raise for Ukraine. But getting off of that, let's get into our schedule for the news tonight. And we've got some news. So starting off today, we're going to be starting in the Kherson region. Now, we do know that the counterattack is ongoing in this area right now as far as we've been able to collect. That seems to be what's the going rate right now, is that the Ukrainians are conducting a counterattack, but we don't know how successful it is or what kind of ground they've captured due to a media blackout. And over the past 48 hours, you can see this media blackout come into effect in this entire area because the only news we got today from the Kherson region was taken by a citizen that is in Kherson City and also a security camera that was near what we're going to be talking about. And based off of where these markers are, I think y'all know what happened, and also the title kind of gives it away. But after we cover that news, we'll then be moving into the Mykolaiv area and also south of Odessa to the small town of Zatoka. Sorry, that was really hard for me to pronounce, and we'll be covering the news there. After we cover pretty much all of our southwestern front news, we'll then be moving up into Russia. We won't be able to cover this bit of news, unfortunately. This was actually in our short summary today, and it got it age restricted, and so I can't show it on the stream because it would be age restricted, but the link to the map is in the description below, and so if you would like to see it, you can see it there, and you can also see it on the summary video, which of course has been age restricted. So that pretty much means the only news we'll be covering in Russia today is the location unknown news, and after we do that, we're then going to move down to Kyiv to cover the news in the Chernobyl area, because we've actually gotten some really interesting video footage there. Well, it's recent, but it's showing things that have long since passed. We'll then be moving down into the location unknowns, and we'll also be covering day 152's news, which is the blue dots. And before we get to day 153, we'll finally take our first break for the night to answer as many questions as we... Well, not as many. We'll be answering 3 questions from the chat during that segment. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on from day 152's location unknown news and moving into day 153. After we cover day 153, we're then going to be moving into the Kharkiv front, which we have one bit of news from, and it's brand new footage from the 3rd day of the war, which was the day before this channel actually became huge. And it shows what the Russians were doing in Kharkiv, and we'll cover that here in a little bit. After we cover that news, we'll then be moving down into the Lysychansk area, and we'll be covering all of the news here. We have about 4 bits of news in this specific spot. Before we move down to Popasna, Svitlodarsk, and Alchesk, we're going to take another pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on to the Alchesk, Popasna, Svitlodarsk news, and we'll also cover the rest of the news that's here in the Southern Front. After we do that, we will not have a speech from President Zelensky tonight. I was not able to find one. We'll actually pull up the President of Ukraine's website at the end of the stream and watch the speech from there, because I'm sure it's been uploaded by this point. And then once we do that, we'll have reached the end of tonight's stream. And so, I hope y'all are as excited as me to get to the big news we've got today, because it is massive. A lot of y'all knew that the Antonovsky Bridge had been hit by Ukrainian artillery days before, and based off the precision strike, it seemed that the Ukrainians' philosophy at the time was to weaken the spans of the bridge enough that heavier equipment could not cross. Well, it appears that they've decided that that's not good enough, because over the course of last night, Ukrainian artillery once again bore down on the bridge, which we can see here in this video, which I'll show y'all right here. And initial reports say that several spans of the bridge have been entirely destroyed. Apparently, these were also HIMARS missiles, and based off the story we've been getting, the original barrage on the bridge was done with 155mm howitzers. This barrage was done by the far more powerful and far heavier hitting HIMARS missiles. And so, here's the video in the distance showing the flashes and booms off of the Antonovsky Bridge as the Ukrainians destroyed the only network, the only artery that supplied Kherson with supplies and kept the Russian forces going.
Что-то чувствую, моста не будет завтра.
You can hear the little booms as they echo across the land, and it's just a good sight, you know? We're of course going to go into what this means for the Russians a lot more after these 2 videos.
Это по мосту все полетело?
Нет, не все, где-то тут. Что-то, мне кажется, может, и по грамму только что дали.
Смотри, какие баллы.
Это ПВОшка.
Это ПВО?
Да. Вот после вот такой хуеты все и началось.
We see Russian air defenses trying to shoot down the HIMARS missiles, but I just gotta tell you that the brave and impregnable Russian air defenses don't seem to be that brave or impregnable whenever challenged.
Потому что они вылетают только когда они засекают издали ракеты. Ну хуй они их прочитают, ебать, эти ракеты сейчас прилетят.
Ох, ебать. Не-не.
And they're firing off even more missiles.
Вот.
Там я вот ту хрень поставила, понял? Типа дальше, там как будто что-то достроили.
Угу. Смотри, сейчас будет жесткий перелет.
О, ты себе взрывы снял.
Да.
Скажешь мне потом.
Угу.
So silence has now taken over the area. The Russian air defense batteries have fallen silent. The missiles have stopped falling. And out in the distance, right out there where I'll show you, my mouse cursor is going to circle it, right there in that little spot where there's only 2 specks of light is the Antonovsky Bridge, which separates Kherson from the other side of the Dnieper River. The video then ends, but we have a second video showing the Kherson Bridge being hit from a whole entire different perspective. And so here's that video of the bridge being hit again. This time it appears to be in some kind of a night vision camera, but nonetheless, I'm just going to let y'all see it for yourselves. As you can see right there, the bridge is being hit by the rockets. You can kind of see the faint outline of the bridge right here. You can see it crossing the river, and I'll try and show y'all most likely where this was filmed on Google Maps, just so that way we can have a little bit of extra detail being put into this. So we're going to pull up the Antonovsky Bridge right here. We're going to put this on layers, so that way we can get a nice little Google Earth overlay of it. And here's the bridge. And so if we go to, say, no, Street View in Kherson, come on now. Is this in Kherson? Yes, this is in Kherson. Yeah, okay, that is definitely the same bridge. I'm trying to find if we can see an angle with this bridge. Right here? It doesn't appear. Let's see if we can see it from this angle. Alright, so you can see the bridge out there, and you can see how narrowly spaced the spans are as they cross the length of the river. And we can see here in the film, that's the exact same bridge. The spans are spaced the same way. They appear to be the solid spans we see here in the Google Maps picture. And so this is definitely footage of that Dnieper bridge. Now, is this the same spot where we're watching it on film? I'm not entirely sure. We can't really tell which side of the riverbanks this is on. This may be on the Kherson side. But I'm going to let the video continue because the explosions speak for themselves. We can see the first one just subsiding. And then the second one hits, once again in the exact same spot on the bridge. And a third one. Now, due to it being nighttime, it's incredibly hard to tell how much damage the bridge has actually suffered at this point. And we could see multiple missiles hitting the exact same spot on the bridge. So we don't know exactly how badly off this bridge has been damaged. We already knew that the spans in that certain area of the bridge had been damaged enough where they were no longer crossable by heavy vehicles, but we don't know what kind of damage these 5 or 6 HIMARS missiles have also done to the bridge as well. Some initial statements have come out saying that the bridge has been destroyed entirely in that area and the spans have collapsed into the sea. Well, not really the sea, but the river. Other reports have come out saying that the bridge has been heavily damaged to the point that that span is unstable, and it may be a matter of time before it collapses and falls into the river. We're not really sure if it's in the process of collapsing or has collapsed, but one thing is certain out of those 2 messages is that the bridge has been so heavily damaged at this point that it's not crossable by any vehicles of the Russian military or any vehicles at all, even civilian vehicles that are far lighter in weight. And so what does this mean? Well, if we look at Google Maps, you can see here that the Dnieper River starts to span out into a delta in a way, kind of a marsh here for a small bit. And further up, you can see that there are no other bridge crossings except for this railroad bridge right here across the entirety of the Dnieper River all the way until Novokakhovka, which is right here, and the only crossing is this dam. And even at that, you can kind of consider it kind of a crossing. It's a much narrower bridge than the Antonovsky Bridge further south, and these are the only 2 bridges, the only 2 river accesses that they have to get to the other side. And so what this means for the Russian forces in this area is that if this bridge has been damaged to the point, which we've largely gotten confirmation on it, where it cannot be used by anyone, the only bridge that the Russians have left is the Novokakhovka Bridge. Or they can try and move vehicles across the railroad bridge further north near the Antonovsky Bridge, although that would be highly circumstantial, and railroad bridges, while incredibly strong, can be destroyed somewhat easily, especially if it's by missiles focused on a single span. We have seen that throughout the war, and it's definitely possible. So what this means for the Kherson garrison is that they most likely have they're going to be running out of supplies because the supply lines are going to be stretched thin, and they're also going to be having to move out of one artery, this Novokakhovka area, to supply the entire western force that's across the Dnieper River. This spells certain failure for the Russians, and on top of that, there's not even a route of retreat for the vehicles anymore that the Russians use, and maybe even the soldiers. If too many soldiers try and cross the bridge at the same time, the weight, hypothetically, might make the span collapse, and then those soldiers could fall into the river and most likely drown. So we can get the idea here that nothing's going well for the Russians in the Kherson area anymore, and if the Russians were to find themselves in a little bit of a tough situation here in the future where the Ukrainians start to push into the city incredibly quickly, they may be faced with no other option rather than to surrender because they'd practically be encircled at that point. And due to the river, this is also another big point, Due to the river becoming a marsh in this area that's largely inhospitable except for around the base of the bridge and further down the length, there's really no way logistically for the Russians to create effective river crossings for vehicles or soldiers. The delta is just too wide. It in fact extends all the way to Oleshki, which, if we measure this delta from end to end, makes this delta an entire 2.5 miles in length. And the question would be, would the Russians ever have time to create a roadway through this marsh, which would be unfordable by vehicles or by boats, to allow most of their forces to withdraw? And the answer is no. And so the Russian forces here have gotten themselves into a very tough situation. And thanks to the Ukrainian HIMARS, of course supplied by the United States, they've been able to finally secure the upper hand in the area. And hopefully it will come to fruition incredibly soon. With that is all the news that we've been able to confirm on the Kherson front. We don't have any news about how the counterattacks have been going, but we have been able to confirm that whatever has happened in the Vyskapilia area, it appears that Vyskapilia has been captured by Ukrainian forces, showing a decent taking in the northern area of the front, and hopefully it will be a series of many more to come. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kherson front, and we're now moving into Mykolaiv, where we have seen that there's been more damage caused to Mykolaiv due to Russian bombardments. Here's the video of damage to what was claimed in the title to be a Mykolaiv enterprise, which pretty much says business. And so here's the video of the damage that the Russians have caused to another area of Mykolaiv. Of course, the damage is extensive. We don't know what this was hit by. Usually I say that this place was bombed because it really covers all bases. It was hit by an explosive. The damage, of course, is unfortunate. And hopefully no one was injured or killed in this attack. But once again, we have no numbers on that, and we're not entirely sure. That's the end of the video, but once again, the Russians are attempting in a very desperate attempt to try and cause the Ukrainians to falter, to have civilians and citizens panic, but of course, none of that is happening. The Ukrainians are as strong now as they have ever been, and hopefully, here in this front, it will, of course, coalesce into a nice little counterattack. And before we move on entirely out of the Kherson area, I want to take a second to explain the logistics of what will have to operate, of how this area will operate for the Russians now that the Antonovsky Bridge has been destroyed, because that's something I kind of glossed over. This is the only bridge that the Russians can cross by. I did say that. I did not explain why this is going to be an incredibly difficult and incredibly, almost impossible thing for the Russians to pull off. First, all supplies will have to cross through the town of Novokakovka. So, if vehicles have to stop for the night, or for any reason, the Ukrainians will know that they're almost always going to be somewhere around this bridge, either on the northern or southern side. The other thing is that there is now only one corridor to Kherson. You cannot divide the forces up into the logistics passing through Novokakovka and then down towards Kherson, or straight over the river to Kherson. Now all supplies have to move down the M14 straight into the city. This means that this convoy has to travel some, in a straight line as the crow flies, 30 miles, pretty much east to west, with the Ukrainian lines just miles away, to deliver supplies to Kherson. This gives the Ukrainians a window of opportunity where Russian forces at the closest are only, let me pull out a ruler here and measure this again, some 5 miles, the average distance that a DJI Mavic can fly, from them, and they have to travel a 30-mile road that's that close to the front. This gives you a pretty good idea of how much easier it's going to be for the Ukrainians to destroy these supply trucks and these convoys before they can ever get to Kherson and supply those forces to keep them running. Now we're starting to see where the problem comes into be. And if no supplies, or a very small amount of it, successfully makes it into the Kherson area, then that means that the Russian forces there are going to be worse supplied. They're going to have less ammunition, less gas, less of everything. They're not even going to have replacement parts to keep tanks and vehicles running. And so slowly, and when I say slowly, it may be the course of days, weeks, or months, they're going to start running out of ammunition, food, and everything else. The garrison will most likely be surrounded, and there's no way out, once again, because of the marsh on the other side that's surrounding pretty much the entirety of the city. And so then they'll be faced with an option. Either they stay here, and they end up in a Mariupol-like situation with no hope because the Russians will not be able to cross anywhere near this area and relieve this force, or they can surrender. And so, faced with that option, I would assume that the Russian garrison would most likely surrender. Russian forces are not as, I guess you could say, into the morale. They don't have the esprit de corps that the Ukrainian forces do, and so they most likely will just give up and surrender. Just for some of those of y'all who do not know, esprit de corps is pretty much the military way of saying camaraderie and morale, especially in Western countries like Britain and the United States. Also, I think France, but I'm not entirely sure with that. Don't quote me on the French part. So now that I've explained this, I hope y'all are seeing the real pickle that destroying and heavily damaging the Antonovsky Bridge has really put the Russians into, because it's almost going to be impossible to keep the forces in Kherson intact. In fact, if the Russians were smart and actually trying to conserve manpower, I would not see it as unbelievable for them to literally start a long march of the soldiers, abandoning all the vehicles or trying to destroy them in Kherson, and trying to retreat across the Antonovsky Bridge if it still is surviving, if none of the spans have been knocked out. And even at that, that's highly questionable. So with that, hopefully that's explained this little conundrum a whole lot better. And now we're going to actually move out of this area entirely and down towards the town that on the surface seems unimportant, but it is incredibly important to the Ukrainians, and it may be the reason why the Russians are literally trying to level the town. This railroad bridge is one of the few railroad bridges that crosses from Odessa further south towards Romania. Surprisingly enough, y'all will not believe this, but there is no direct railroad crossing or road crossing into Romania from Ukraine. You have to go through Moldova and then into Romania. But still, this is one of those few railroad networks that makes it across, and on top of that, it is the only railroad bridge in the area. And so for the entirety of the war, the Russians have occasionally targeted this area, and specifically the bridge, but now it appears in usual fashion, the Russians are like spoiled children, and now that they have not been able to take out the bridge, they're now going to take it out on the town surrounding it, and we can see that based off of last night's attack, a lot of damage has come to the town of Zatoka. We don't know how many civilians have been killed in this attack, but it's certainly another brutal attack directly targeted at civilians, typical of the Russian playbook, and I hope that the Ukrainians are able to find the commanders, most likely the Navy commanders, that, of course, carried out these attacks, and hold them accountable for what they did. And so, here's the video. The damage has been incredibly extensive. In typical fashion, the Russians do not care about civilians. They don't care about their own, much less Ukraine's, and they will do anything. They will go to any means to try and kill Ukrainians at home, kill them on the front, the sickest ways, the most unimaginable ways possible, and in the most dishonorable and low-down ways. I'm trying to find the best ways to describe Russian attacks, but it's really hard to put into words once you see it this many times. That's the end of the video, and I hope that one day, every single Russian commander and every single Russian soldier that has carried out these kinds of unsolicited and heinous attacks on these Ukrainian citizens who were doing nothing will be held accountable. They almost, of course, when they get eventually captured, if they are, by the Ukrainians, usually, as far as we've seen right now, the Ukrainians sentence them to life in prison, which is actually incredibly lenient. Most European countries as a whole have completely outlawed the death penalty, and Ukraine has been one of those nations. Usually, the Russians are not as sympathetic to the Ukrainians. If they capture foreigners, like you and me, from the United States, and they're able to capture these, they usually send them to the DPR, and the DPR will sentence them to death. So far, I've not been able to confirm that any of them have been executed, but a lot of them have been sentenced to death and are sitting there waiting for the day that the DPR will finally execute them. And it kind of gives you an idea of how the Russians view the rest of the world, and how, and really honestly, I guess you could say, in the justice system, how civilized the Ukrainians are still being to the Russians, knowing that those same kinds of sympathies, like giving someone life in prison, would not be reciprocated by the Russians. The Russians, of course, would most likely give the death penalty, much like they were advocating for almost the entire Azov battalion near the end of the Battle of Mariupol. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the area of Zatoka, and I hope that there was not a lot of civilians wounded or killed there. Of course, we don't have a number right now, so there's no way to be sure. But we're now going to be moving out of that town, and we're now going to be moving across... Let me make sure. No, we're not moving across the sea. We're actually moving up to Kyiv. We've actually had an interesting little bit of news north of Kyiv. On day 152 of the news, where we can see a person, we don't know who it is, but they are wandering around the Chernobyl exclusion zone and showing some of the equipment that was destroyed that the Russians were using that was left behind months ago. And so I'm going to show you all this because it is actually a massive column of vehicles that has been destroyed on the side of this road, all sitting in a perfect line. And so, here's the video.
Колонна уничтоженной российской техники недалеко от Чернобыля. Уничтожена она была из Байрактара. Тут получается у нас БТРы.
We can hear the Ukrainian mentioning that it was a Bayraktar, so it appears that all of these vehicles were destroyed in line by a Bayraktar.
Остался пепел. Вот даже местами пооставались с пушками. Просто жесть. Смотрите, там даже местами пооставались рули.
Insides are, of course, burned out.
Вон она, огромная так вот.
And it looks like the Ukrainians actually came through to try and push them off the road and cut them in two with like a plasma torch or something, because they're literally just in halves right now on the side of this road.
Тара. И сейчас вам покажу воронку от авиационной бомбы, которые сюда потом скидывали российские самолеты. Вот еще один Беттер, тоже с уцелевшей пушкой. А вот МТЛБ.
And a BMP-2. You can tell it's a BMP-2 because of the wider turret ring. BMP-2s have bigger turrets than a BMP-1. But that's the end of the video, and that gives you a really good idea, because this is surprisingly, believe it or not, this is the exact same road that 40-mile-long convoy was on at the very beginning of the war, where everyone in the world, including military experts, were saying, oh, give it a minute, they're gonna get their stuff together, and that 40-mile-long convoy is gonna be like a giant slithery-o snake from that 80s video game, and they're going to push down into Kyiv, and they're going to win the war for the Russians, and it's going to all be over. This is that exact same road that 40-mile-long convoy was on, and what we may be seeing here months later is the remains of what is left of that 40-mile-long convoy. Nothing but destruction, death, and broken hopes for the Russians, leaving behind husks that should remind the Russians of what they actually went into this war with the aim of doing, which was taking over Ukraine in 3 days to a week, and they ended up losing tens of thousands of soldiers, only to retreat and give up all of that land to the Ukrainians just a month and a half later. With that, we're now going to be moving on from this little video. A nice reminder of things that happened in the past, and great times to be proud of Ukraine in winning such major battles as the Battle of Kyiv and Kharkiv, and we'll be touching on that one later as well. And now, oh golly, we're not going to be covering this bit of news, just to let y'all know again, it's too graphic. YouTube let me know that today by putting an age restriction on my summary. And so if you would like, please go check out that summary video, or click on the link in the description below, which will take you to this map, and then you can watch this one for yourself. It shows a Switchblade drone flying into a group of FSB agents somewhere in the Bryansk Oblast, and killing one and wounding several. Unfortunately, I cannot show that due to its graphic nature, according to YouTube. But we're now going to be moving into the Moscow area. And I gotta say, the Russians and the Russian state TV seems to be getting more and more blatant with their absolute hatred for Western political figures. Now, at the beginning of the war, and throughout the entirety of it so far, they've made it very clear they just hate the West. They hate the people in it, they hate the culture, they hate everything about it. And they've made that incredibly clear through their threats of nuclear annihilation. But one thing that they're doing new is that for the first time ever, I've seen them directly talk about killing a Western leader. And that specific Western leader is Boris Johnson. Now, we do not get into politics here on this channel. We know what's going on with him, but right now he is still the standing Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and he is making another visit to Ukraine rather soon. And so, listen to what the Russians on state TV have to say about Boris Johnson visiting Ukraine once more.
Ну а лучший подарок, я думаю, в период, когда Джонсон намеревается в последний раз, последний визит посетить Киев, ну, по какому-нибудь объекту в Киеве отправить крылатую ракету «Калибр» с надписью «Hasta la vista, baby».
What type of, there's no way you could be more incivil, and I understand that people are pissed, obviously, and we also say sometimes that we wish Putin would get the short end of a stick or maybe the explosive end of a missile here on this channel. But to sit there and point out Boris Johnson specifically, and it's not hatred pointed at a nation and what they're doing, it's pointed at a specific person. I wish we could just shoot a missile straight at that guy with Hasta la Vista written onto it. That seems to be crossing a little bit of a civilized line. I don't know why this guy has a personal beef with Boris, but I would have to, and we don't weigh into politics here, but that just seems a little low. Because if Putin was visiting another country, largely, you have to say, we can't attack the government directly. And, of course, we all have our thoughts about Putin, and I have to say that mine are not sympathetic or supportive of him in any means, but it seems incredibly uncivilized to talk about directly attacking a foreign leader, especially when you may have to be at the negotiating table with them here in the future. So with that, we're going to be moving on from this a little bit of Russian stupidity. I hope this has not managed to lead to brain cancer among most of my viewers or anything else, because Russian state TV has very negative side effects on people. Most of it is the, I guess you could say, the onset of insanity, or I guess you could say stupidity. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Russian news, which is all we have today, and I hate that it's just nothing but stupidity. But now we're going to be moving down into our location unknowns and covering the day 152 pieces of news, which we have about 5 of. Starting off, we've seen that an enemy was spotted by a Ukrainian drone, and the Russians were none the wiser until they looked up and saw it, and then they started trying to run and also try to shoot it down. And so, here's the video. First, we can see the Russian soldiers sitting on the side of what appears to be a burned out field, and they look up, and you see the Russian soldier right here. He appears to maybe have spotted the drone, but he's not letting anyone else know yet. We can see one guy here playing with his AK, and now all of them have figured out that there's a drone above them. They're freaking out, they've gotten up, and they're starting to run. The artillery is probably being honed in on them right now, and so it's probably a smart thing for them to get up and try and run. And now they're trying to shoot down the drone. But, of course, the drone's still filming them and flying, and it appears that they've largely been unsuccessful so far. They're firing at the drone, missing still. And now you see one of them, he's gotten smart. He's leading the pack. He's went for a run. He was like, you know what? I think this is a pointless endeavor. They already know our position. They've probably already gotten the coordinates to an artillery unit, and the artillery is going to be raining down. So this man decided, I'm just going to start running before everyone else. The rest of the unit saw him running, and like a pack of, I guess you could say, wild animals that have a herd mentality, they all start running behind him as well. And they're like, oh, shoot, we got to get out of here. We could see, of course, the slowest of the bunch. When this guy started running to the right, they started running to the left right here. You can see him running out to the tree line. And now you can see them all decide, oh, crap, they're all running the other way. So now they start running down the road as well. And now they're running right under the drone. They're not even running away. They're running to it. Now, it doesn't look like any of them are firing right now, but it also looks like they did something else smart. It looks like they're trying to go for some low ground in kind of a depression, I guess is the best thing to call it. It's not really a pit. It's more of like an oval shape, so I guess we'll call it a depression. But they went into it, so that way if artillery does start to rain down, unless if it's a direct hit on them, it most likely won't kill them. So a pretty interesting move by the Russians, but still, they didn't move out of sight of the drone, and the drone's just going to give their exact coordinates once again to the artillery battery, which will correct their fire to this specific depression in the ground, and then obliterate the forces there. And so, by and large, while it seemed a little bit like a smart move, really it's still not, because they're still being seen by the drone, and as they say, you can run, but you can't hide from Ukrainian artillery. With that, we're now going to be moving on out of this video, and we're going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news from yesterday, where we can see that an L119 howitzer was being used by the Ukrainians, and from what we can tell, it's inside Ukraine. This is the first video of an M119 being used on the front lines. While incredibly short video, this does mean something important. The first batch of Ukrainian soldiers to be trained in the United Kingdom have finally arrived back in Ukraine with British weaponry, and they're now using them on the front lines, and it has been confirmed. Just in case you all haven't known, the British have actually taken large efforts to transport Ukrainian soldiers from Ukraine to Britain and train them on British weaponry like this L119, and then, with that knowledge, send them back to Ukraine to carry on the war. And it appears that they've done an incredibly good job, as we can see footage today of that very thing happening. And so it's great to see. I can't wait to see more of this. And also, huge credit to the British for providing these L119s. If y'all don't know the history of this specific artillery piece, the L119, well, actually the L118, which is its, I guess you could say, grandfather in a way, because the L119 is just the modified L118 in a way. These were used in, I would say, the last war that the British truly fought, which was the Falklands War. Now, they were heavily involved in Iraq, and I must give credit to those brave and valiant British soldiers that fought in the Battle of Basra, but I feel like the Falklands War was Britain's, I guess you could say, shining glory of the late 20th century, and it's something that I've always been a huge fan of its history. And we can see here L118s in this picture being used in a light gun exercise in 2013, most likely in the United Kingdom. But I have an absolute place in my heart for these artillery pieces, because when I was a kid, well, I say a kid, it was only about 8 years ago. When I was a kid, I used to watch a lot of videos on the Falklands War, and I remember watching videos of these L118s going to work in the Falkland Islands, and also the incredible stories of the Gurkhas and the battles that they fought on the island against the Argentinians. It's a really cool history, and I think the Falklands War is one of the most interesting wars of the late 20th century. But with that, I've talked too much about the L118. We're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news. But once again, huge credit to the British for being an ally of the Ukrainians. On to the next bit, we've seen an M777 on the move. This, of course, was on day 152, and while we've seen M777s on the move here and there, it's always a beautiful sight to see that American weapons, British designed, are once again back in Ukraine and still at it, giving effective fire to the Russians, destroying loads of units, and helping the Ukrainians turn the tide of this war and hopefully push the Russians back. With that, that's the end of this video, but a very nice one to see, and it's always nice to see American arms, and we don't really know where this M777 came from. It could have been from Canada, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, I believe. Let me try and think of everyone who's got one. The Australians had some. I don't know who sent the specific M777, but a large amount of them came from the United States. And so I have to give credit to the United States and all countries that have sent over M777s, because without those incredibly precise artillery pieces, the Ukrainians may not be able to turn around the tide of this war like they have been. With that, we're now moving on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can also see a Russian tank being destroyed. So let's check this out. We can see the camera here looking down at the tank. The tank is right here, right near the crosshair, I guess you could call it, and the bomblet is now on its way. It appears that it's going to fall towards the bottom right of the tank, and it did. Not a direct hit. Now we can see that little crosshair moving and adjusting in the typical way, and now we know that that tank's time is nigh, as this next bomblet, based off of where he's put it, is most likely going to fall in the center of the turret, or on the engine bay. It was more on the engine bay. It appears that a small fire has now erupted on the back of the tank, which will most likely burn it out, but we can see them dropping a third bomblet, and that one appeared to hit the engine bay once more, definitely knocking it out, and an impressive hit by the Ukrainian drones. The Ukrainian drones have been doing an impressive amount to try and turn the tide of this war as well, and I do believe that based off of what we've been seeing, drones are the future of war, whether they be large, small, heavy hitting or light hitting, we've seen drones become an important facet of this war for the Ukrainians, and as the war has continued, the Russians. I believe that the United States and many countries in the Western world are looking at this war with great intent as to the drone technology being used, and they're now coming up with ideas and methods to use them in their doctrines as well. If we can harness the power of the drone, this may be the next revolutionary idea in war, like the machine gun, the airplane, or the tank. With that, we're now going to be moving on from this bit of news and on to the next, and our final bit of news before we move into a question segment, where we can see a sniper using thermals, and coolly and interestingly enough, to put it a better way, we can actually see that there's some kind of camera attached to the scope, and you can look at it through your phone. When you see the SVD here, and also a ghillie suit, and we see the cameraman showing off the SVD, and now he's showing his phone, which is showing the exact thing that that scope is looking at. Incredibly interesting, because that actually allows, I guess, in a way, the spotter, which is here with the sniper, to give adjustments without having to peek his head over the top with his own scope. He can kind of look through the camera of the sniper and maybe give adjustments if need be, or just at least see what the sniper is looking at. A very interesting little piece of technology, something I've never seen before, and I don't know if this has been something that's existed for some time or if it's brand new, but if anyone has experience with thermal scopes, please let us know in the live chat, and let us know, is that something that's been around for a while, or is that brand new? Because I found it incredibly interesting to me, and I would like to know from y'all if that is something that's brand new or not. And so with that, we have now covered all of the Location Unknown news for day 152. Before we move on to the Location Unknown news for day 153, here in the dark gray dots, we're going to take a quick pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we're then going to move on into the Location Unknown news that we have left, the Kharkiv area, and also the Luhansk and Lysychansk area. And so without further ado, Matthew, what do we have?
All right, folks, it is now time for the first question segment of the night. But before we get to our first super chat, we have to address the Morse code. Our 3 decoders on the channel are WF2U, we also have Mark Hodges, and C. Fay. They all cracked the Morse code, and they said, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, the message in Morse is London Bridge is falling down, the crows have left the tower, Russia cannot stand for longer. And WF2U puts in a $20 super chat.
And you are correct, WF2U. That is the message. And y'all may be thinking, that doesn't really sound like it has a lot to do with the Ukraine. But if y'all were here a little bit earlier in the intro, y'all may have heard something a little bit odd. Now, I'm not going to say exactly what it is. I'm going to highly suggest that y'all go back and re-watch the entire intro, the 10-minute lead up to the actual stream, because there was a little something special in there tonight. I don't think a lot of y'all may have heard it or caught it. We're not going to be doing that often. It was a very special message, and it has an interesting little code. Well, not really a code, but more of a Morse code message that you can look into and find something out about. We may start doing that more regularly. In fact, we may make that something that pops up in the middle of the stream randomly, but I'm testing it out tonight to see if it's successful or not. Also, one last thing before I actually talk about the message and what it means, there is also a little special tone that sounds off for the specific thing I'm talking about. If y'all can figure out where that tone came from and how it pertains to the messages that were sent in tonight's Morse code message during the sirens, you will be the winner of a huge congratulations. Because we don't really have much else to do. But I hope that y'all look into that, and I hope y'all see the correlations and similarities in between the two if you know. But of course, that's correct. And I do have to say that the Russians cannot go on much longer in the state they're in, especially in the Kherson region, which we covered a little bit early on. And so congratulations to all 3 of our Morse code readers. Y'all have done an incredibly good job tonight. And if y'all would like to hop in as well, all you have to do is learn a simple bit of Morse code, and with that knowledge, you too can decipher the messages that are put up on the stream every few days or so. And so with that, we are on to the questions. And once again, congratulations to all 3 of the Morse code readers for getting that message correct.
And also, real quick, I just want to mention, it looks like we have about 8,000 people watching, so pretty high viewership tonight. If you would very much please hit that like button. It tells YouTube we're doing a good job and helps us to get the streams out there. And also, before we move on to our first super chat, I want to go over the poll that I put up about 14 minutes ago. And the question was, if you were in Zelensky's position, how would you proceed in the war? So 63% of you said begin aggressive offensive strategy, and 31% of you said continue defensive, no surrender. And the two most unpopular options, which I understand why, was attempt to negotiate with Russia and consider a conditional surrender. So very interesting that everybody chose aggressive offensive strategy. Personally, me, I think they should continue the defensive. Obviously, no surrender because it's their country and Russia has no right to be there. But what do you think about that 63% enforcer?
I would have to agree, but I would also have to kind of take a blend of the two because there are, of course, limitations. Continuing defensives allows the Russians a lot of, I guess you could say, breathing room, and allows them to build up their supplies once more and then try and continue on offensives again. And while a defensive war is a winning war, as long as you're not losing ground, if you always play a defensive, you will eventually start to lose so much ground over time that it's become unattainable and you will start to lose the war. On the other hand, if you were to do nothing but offensives, you can run out your own supplies and lead your forces into the exact same position that the Russians are in. And so I would do more of a blend. And I think what the Ukrainians are doing right now is incredibly intelligent. They are largely pausing most of their offensive actions, or any actions for that matter, along most of the front lines, except for two areas. There seems to be a bit of a heightened activity around the Lysychansk area, and as we know right now, there is an ongoing counterattack, at least the information suggests, in the Kherson area. And so they are keeping defensives in enough areas where the Russians cannot gain ground and they are conserving their resources, but at the same time they're taking advantage of the best places to attack and they're trying to push the Russians back there. So honestly, I would kind of go with a blend of the two, but by and large, I do agree with the sentiments that strong aggressive strategies will be the way to win this war as it goes on, and now that the Russians have been ground down to where they're not really able to continue on offensives. And so I hope that does address the poll, and we are now on to the next question.
And also, Enforcer, I just saw Rich Hogan put in the live chat, the tone in the beginning of the stream is the Lincolnshire poacher from the British number station.
Oh, I'm glad that someone knows about number stations. We might make a video on those. I've been thinking about that, and I've always been interested in them. And I'm glad that you know your little numbered stations, because now that y'all have got that information, the Lincolnshire Poacher number station, maybe someone can finally put together the pieces as to what the Morse code message during the sirens has to do with that tone. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our question segment, and that was a really good observation by you, and congratulations for knowing where that tone came from.
All right, and up first for our first super chat, we have a $22 donation from Duncan VR, who says, being an Aussie, I can't donate to your fundraisers, but happy to support you two. The new Morse code today, I cracked it. It says, ba, 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 ba. Matthew's ba is getting better. And to answer your question, no, it's not. And he says, Colonel Duncan, LSA. And yes, Leaf Spring Army for life. And Duncan, like I said, my ba is not getting any better.
Well, thank you so much for the support, Duncan. I'm glad you have been enjoying the streams, of course, as usual. And thank you so much for making Matthew be tortured by saying ba. It's always fun to hear that. And of course, keep it coming because he's embarrassed to do it. I get a good laugh out of it, and everyone on stream gets a pretty good laugh out of it too. And also, can you circle back on that one and reread it again, just so that way I can make sure to keep my footing on where I was?
Yes, let me circle back to that in the spreadsheet as well. Let's see here. He says,
Sorry about that.
being an Aussie, I can't donate to your fundraisers, but happy to support you too. And then he went on to say the whole little sheep routine.
And of course, it is good to know that you were able to decipher the Morse code message, just making sure we didn't miss anything there. And thank you once again, Duncan VR, for the support. It helps this channel to keep on running, and without support from our viewers, it wouldn't be possible. Of course, we don't run any ads on anything. We find those incredibly annoying, and so our channel relies entirely on the goodwill of our viewers to keep it alive. And so thank you all once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing going, helping us to keep the lights on, so that way we can focus on this and keep reporting the war until the very end. And so thank you once again, Duncan. And we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Jose Diaz, who says, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, I am back after last week. I flew back from Columbus, Ohio for one of my daughter's weddings. Puerto Rico loves Ukraine and will support Ukraine all until all orcs are destroyed and leave. Gloria a Ukrainia.
Well, thank you so much for the support, and it's good to hear that you are back in Puerto Rico. And of course, thank you so much to the entirety of the territory of Puerto Rico for supporting the Enforcer. That's incredibly cool. And also, another thing is that he said Ohio, correct?
Yes.
Interesting. I've never been to Ohio, but Ohio is kind of a mixed bag from what I've heard. I've heard a lot of people hating on it. A lot of people say that Cleveland's pretty bad, but I've also heard some people say that Cleveland and Ohio as a whole isn't really that bad. And so if people can enlighten us in the chat, is Ohio bad or is it good? Because I would be interested in knowing, and I hope that that wedding went incredibly well. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, I hope we have addressed that comment. And we are now on to the last one of this question segment, and then we'll be moving into the next segment of news.
And the last one of this question segment goes to Smart Lucker, who puts in a $20 donation and says, Hey Enforcers, first time supporting, and I've only been here since day 94, and I wish I was here sooner. Do y'all check the price of crude oil? Because those exports are what Russia relies on, ? Keep up the great work, and hello from California.
And thank you so much for the support, Smart Luck. That's really cool that it's the first time you've supported the channel. And also, we have a lot of viewers from around the world, and a lot of them inside the United States. And it is cool to hear that you're from California. Now, I would ask you specifically what part you're from, but I feel like that kind of be doxing you, so don't answer that question. But still, pretty cool to hear. Now, to answer that question, we don't look at the price of oil exports often, but since you brought it up, let's pull up the price of crude oil per barrel. Crude oil per barrel price today. Can we actually get a chart on this? Let's see if history will give us an answer. No, let's pull up a chart. We want something that we can look at. All right, so right now, see, this goes back all the way until July 29th. Well, no, July 28th of 2021. So it's an entire year of information right here. So we can see right now that the start of the, well, actually oil prices were climbing a little bit after Christmas. They dropped right there. And once the war had started on February 24th, which was right here, the price of oil per barrel was at $96.39, really 40 cents if you round it up. After the war started, the price of oil has skyrocketed on a couple of occasions to get around 100. Let me read again. 120. Let me make sure we can go back to February 24th and read that correctly. So it was actually, a correction here, it was actually at $91 per barrel at the very start of this war. As we move on further down the chain, we can see that it rose often to above $100 a barrel, and several times got up into the 110s and 120s. So we can see right here that the price of oil definitely did get expensive, but it does appear that as the war has continued, the price of oil has started to drop back down to its, I guess you could say, pre-war values. It's gotten down to 95, and that is compared directly to the 24th, the very first day of this war, at 90. And so it's only $4 per barrel above what it was at the start of the war. And so it does look like the oil prices are starting to drop back down to normal. I'm not really sure why and how, but that definitely does have a massive impact on the Russian economy. That's really the only thing that they're allowed to export at this point and that people around the world will buy. Of course, the Chinese and the Indians have stepped up, as well as the Pakistanis, to buy some of those raw materials like lumber, timber, and stuff like that. And so that may be bolstering the Russian economy a little bit, but they are selling that timber at discount prices compared to what they were selling it to the West. India and China, well, China's far more economically successful than India, but they're not as rich as these Western countries, and they don't pay as much for these raw materials. And that is also why they've stepped up and started to buy materials at massive rates from the Russians, because they've now become incredibly cheap because there's no competition to buy them. There's a load of supply, but very small demand. So I hope this does answer the question. Based off of the graph, and the falling oil prices that we're seeing here, I would assume that the Russians are going to start being in a bind if the oil price starts to fall to what it was in, say, December of 2021, which was around $72 a barrel. So with that, I hope that it has answered the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we have reached the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat tonight, do not fret. We get to all of those. And also, if you've sent in a live chat question, or if you're new to the stream and you're wondering, do I have to pay to have a question answered? The answer is no. We answer live chat questions every single night, but we always make sure to answer everyone's questions who supports this channel, because without them, we wouldn't be able to keep going. And so if they do send in a super chat, we always want to give them a huge amount of appreciation for helping us to survive by answering their question. So, without further ado, we're going to be moving on to the next segment of news, but if y'all would like to take a quick moment, please make sure to hit that like button. We've gotten up to 2,400 likes right now, and we would be highly appreciative if we could get higher. It helps us to reach more people, and it helps this news to get out to even more folks. On top of that, if you would also like to hit the subscribe button, that would help us out as well, as you will be notified every single day when this news goes live at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for every day of the week except for Mondays. Now, with that out of the way, we're now going to move down into the Day 153 location unknowns. Starting off, we can see a Stugna destroying a T-72, and it's everyone's favorite weapon, the Stugna. And so, here's the video of a Stugna slamming into the side of a Russian BMP, I think. It looks like it may be... No, it's a BMP. It hit it, and it was knocked out. Pretty good thing to see, as each tank, each APC that's destroyed, is one step closer to the Ukrainians are getting to turning the tide of this war and pushing the Russians back. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the security service of Ukraine destroying 3 T-72s, one after the other. And so, here's the video. We can see the T-72 right there in the tree lines, of course silhouetted by its high heat signature, and it got slammed by the bomb, destroying it. We can now see a second T-72 also being hit by a bomblet, but we cannot tell if that hit was destructive to the tank. It may have crippled it, but destroying it, we're not entirely sure. We can now see a crew member trying to clamber his way into this tank, and the bomblet is on its way. And that one, well, that one resulted in some kind of a small nuclear explosion, so I'm fairly confident that that tank was destroyed. And so it's great to see that the security service of Ukraine is out there destroying tanks. And from what we could tell in that video, it appeared that all 3 of these tanks were destroyed in the same tree line at the same time. And so a very nice little, I guess you could say, kill count by that drone. And it's wonderful to know that the drones are incredibly effective. Who knows how much that drone costs? Probably around $5,000 or less. And the bomblets probably cost pennies to the dollar to produce, and we just saw it destroy millions of dollars of tanks that the Russians had most likely been keeping running for decades at this point. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of location unknown news, where we can then see Russian BMP-3s being used by the Ukrainians. This is one of those few instances where we ensure on film that these captured Russian vehicles are being repurposed and used by Ukraine. As we can see here, just out of the corner of the screen, which I'll show y'all again, if we can get it back there, there's the 100mm gun and the 30mm autocannon that is in a BMP-3 turret, and you can also tell by the hatch layout down here that this is certainly a BMP-3 being used by Ukraine. You can see the Ukrainian patches on the soldiers, and is that a nice film or what? Russian weapons being used against the Russian army. It can't get better than that, and it's good to see that the Ukrainians always make sure to bolster their arms, both by foreign support from the West and from the Russians. Beyond the United States, the Russians have done more to arm the Ukrainians than any other country, and ironically, they're trying to defeat Ukraine. And so huge support to the Russian military, who constantly abandons these tanks in perfect running order, so the Ukrainians can just pick them up and continue on the fight in the enemy's vehicles. With that, we're now on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see another Stugna attack occur today, knocking out another Russian vehicle. And so, here's the footage. We can see the Stugna looking out into this bright yellow field. I'm not really sure if it's sunflowers or wheat. The footage is a little bit too grainy to tell. We can see it get aimed down onto the tank which is right there. We can see it hit. Now, we don't see any burning in this point of the video yet, and so we don't know if that was a destroying hit or a disabling hit, but that was certainly a direct hit onto that tank. And it's nice to see that the Ukrainian Stugna anti-tank crews are still out there, and they are still churning out the fire. We don't show all of the Stugna videos we find on the internet anymore because there's just so many of them, they kind of clog up our news. But it's still wonderful to see them because it lets us know that the Ukrainians are still finding a way to manufacture these Stugna missiles, and that the anti-tank crews are still out there and still operating en masse. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our last bit of location unknown news for day 153, where we can see a montage of even more drone strikes. These were done by the Arozivka unit, and we've gotten a brand new montage of them showing the previous amount of destruction that they've caused on the Russian forces as of late. And so here's the video. We can see here a Russian car, a bomblet drop, bomblet blows up. We now see the drone kind of orbiting around and dropping more bomblets near this car. You can also see a destroyed Russian car right there. It appeared that oil was leaking out of the front. We now see them dropping bomblets. We're trying to see what's down there. It looks like, okay, that's a MTLB. Perhaps it looks like an MTLB. We can see them dropping a second bomblet onto it. And that one hit directly onto the rear of that armored personnel carrier. We can now see them dropping bomblets on... It's kind of hard to tell. We'll see where it falls. It fell on some kind of ammunition or vehicle. I can't... Well, it's ammunition. It's burning white, so that's ammunition. Nice job seeing that, because I couldn't. And so they dropped the bomblet right onto it and destroyed it, and I couldn't have told you if there was ammunition there or not. Kind of gives you an idea of the dead-eye accuracy and the eagle eyes that Ukrainian drone operators have to see this kind of stuff. We see another vehicle burning up there. I think it may be a vehicle. Let me... Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. I'm going to have to go back and look at this one to make sure. Ah, man, I can't really tell you. It's burning white, so it's most likely ammunition. But at the same time, it looks like there's a little outline of a vehicle down there, so I can't really tell you for certain whether that's a vehicle or an ammunition stowage. I don't really know. It's still hard to tell. It's continuing to burn, but it's burning white. And as y'all know, there's a general rule that if it's burning black, it's some kind of vehicle. If it burns white, it's ammunition. So I believe it's ammunition, but it was just so hard to tell on that one. But that's the end of the video. And then once again, huge credit to the Arozivka, made up of civilian drone operators making their own bomblets, and they may have been integrated into the TDFs at this point, it seems, as far as we were able to tell. But they've taken the initiative upon themselves to destroy Russian units on their own as citizens of Ukraine, and it's a huge credit to them and the patriotism that all Ukrainians have, that they would undertake such an operation and do it on their own. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the location unknown news, because that's all we have. And we're now going to be moving to Kharkiv. We've had a visit of a phantom of the past. A lot of people say sometimes, like when Lysychansk fell, that Ukraine has never had a worse time in this war, and things have gotten worse than they've ever been. But as the enforcer, and having been here for a total of 153 days, ever since the first hour of this war, when the first missile landed and exploded within Kyiv, I've got to tell y'all that times were a lot worse before, and times have never been better, actually, right now, than at any other time in the war. And I have a video to back that up. A lot of people don't remember everything, and I have to say that's a pretty reasonable thing to not remember everything. That would be terrible if everyone remembered everything that happened in their lives. But at a time, there was actually a moment where the Russians were pretty deep within Kharkiv. There was actually a time when people thought the Russians were just going to roll right through the city and capture it. And we actually got a blast from the past in this video, never before seen footage on my channel, that shows the Russians within Kharkiv city. And so here's the video showing literal Russian army convoys marked with a Z's moving through the city. And this is a reminder of the times that once were and the times that will never be again.
27 февраля. 7 утра.
Here's an entire Russian convoy, unopposed, in the middle of Kharkiv.
Ну и что хотите сказать, ребятки?
We now see the Tiger cars driving through the town as well. And notice, no large firefights, no artillery. You can hear the scattering of gunshots in the distance, but it's sporadic. There is no front line that's been made at this point. The Russians literally were driving through the city unopposed, and the Ukrainians were still trying to build a defense to the Russians. Now, I remember this video. And I remember this was the very moment right here that I said the Ukrainians can win. The Russians were rolling through this town like it was the Battle of Baghdad. And just in case you don't know about the invasion of Iraq in 2003, the Battle of Baghdad lasted 4 days, which was about how long I thought Kharkiv would last, considering that the Russians were moving street to street and not using artillery, much like the United States was doing during that battle. But then they got mowed down by Ukrainian forces. We didn't see that on film, but we saw in the aftermath in another video later on. And this was one of those moments, on top of where the Russians got stopped right outside of Kyiv, where I said this war is not winnable by the Russians, because historically, once you get stopped like this in a war, and you had this unstoppable momentum, and then it just hits a wall and just completely stops, that usually means you've lost the element of surprise and therefore will lose the war. When you see them moving down the street here with the Tiger armored cars, very bunched up in large groups around the cars, and they're about to come under fire from Ukrainians here in a second. And here they come under fire. Now see them firing anti-tank weapons into the buildings. And here's the aftermath of that convoy on film. All these Tiger armored cars were destroyed in a row. The Russians abandoned them and then fled. And this reminds me of those times, those very dark and scary times at the beginning of the war, and maybe the reason why this channel became so prevalent and popular at the time was that people didn't know whether Ukraine would last or not. And at this very time, when this video was uploaded, people in the Pentagon, the Ministry of Defense, and millions of military experts around the world were saying the Ukrainians are going to fall in a matter of days. It's only a matter of time before they collapse. And they would continue to say that for about the next month and a half. And at this very point on this channel, I said, the Ukrainians will hold. There's no way that the Ukrainians can lose at this point. The Russians have lost their momentum. And once you lose your momentum, you are going to start losing the war. And people back then, a decent amount agreed with me, but a lot of people scoffed at those statements and said, but the military experts are saying something totally different. And there was a load of YouTubers out there capitalizing on that as well, saying that Ukraine can't last, the Russians are just so much better. They're impressive, they're wonderful. And now look, those military experts are saying the exact same thing I've been saying the whole entire time. The Russians won't be able to win this war, the Ukrainians are on the upper hand. And a lot of those YouTubers that were saying that the Russians were going to steamroll the Ukrainians, now they've silently taken that little storyline and slid it under the covers, and now they've taken up a new one saying the Ukrainians are going to win. And I always find that a bit of a laughable point, because I remember I sat here and was saying that the Ukrainians were going to win. You can go back and watch those streams, they're still alive. I was saying the Ukrainians were going to win here on day 3 or 4, and no one was on that page. And so, here's the rest of that video showing those destroyed Tigers. And now, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I'm just going to say the experts were pretty wrong in their assessment about a week or two into the war, and all the way up to a month and a half in. So there's the end of the video. And it just reminds me of those times that everyone thought that Ukraine might not last. And up until this point, until I saw this footage, I too was kind of in fear that Ukraine may collapse. And then this footage kind of put that aside on top of what happened in Kharkiv. Now, Hat Guy, I just saw a comment in the comment section. I'm looking over there every once in a while. I saw a Hat Guy say, give names. And I would love to give names of YouTubers that were saying that kind of stuff, but I don't like to cause drama. And that's just kind of my thing. I don't want to cause beef amongst channels. And so I'm not going to give names on that. But I will give you names of organizations that, government organizations that were saying these things. The Pentagon came out, and General Milley specifically came out and said Ukraine will not survive more than 3 days to a week. The British Ministry of Defense, as well as the MI6, came out and also said the same things. Pretty much everyone in the United Kingdom and the United States was on the same page that Ukraine wouldn't last. And that belief was so just so hard-bound that the United States even gave an invitation to President Zelensky to abdicate and flee to the United States, and they will provide safe harbor for him. And that kind of gives you an idea of how staunch that kind of school of thought was at the very beginning of this war, is that the Ukrainians were poorly equipped, ill-trained, didn't have any morale, and they wouldn't last. And so with that, we're now going to move out of the Kharkiv area because we don't have any frontline news to speak of. Currently, there's been no action whatsoever. On film, there hasn't been any kind of probing attacks by the Ukrainians or any kind of action from the Russians. And so as far as we're concerned, this area of the front has fallen silent today. We're going to move on down towards the Chuhuiv area, which of course has had nothing to report as well, and the Stary Saltiv area is once again the same. It borders a large reservoir, which makes it practically impossible for either side to carry on any meaningful actions in that area. We're now going to be moving past the Balaklia and Izium area as well, where once again, nothing has happened. We've now reached Slovyansk, a pretty decent ways down the front lines, and some events have happened here. We've actually seen a look at the outskirts of Slovyansk today from a citizen who pulled out his camera and filmed. One must remember that Slovyansk is around 20 kilometers or around 12 miles from the front lines. And we can see here that even that far away from the front lines, the Russians have done as much as possible to try and damage every square foot of Ukraine that they can. And so here's the video of the destruction that the Russians have brought to the area. I don't know if this is the citizen's house, but it has been entirely destroyed, completely unlivable. And once again, another example of what the Russians try and do to the average Ukrainian citizen. What's so strategically important? What's so militaristic about this house? There's nothing here that denotes that this was used by the Ukrainian military or that the Ukrainian military was even around. The Russians just bombarded this area just for the hell of it because there was Ukrainian civilians living here and they want to make their life a hell on earth or try and kill them the best they can. Another evidence, I guess you could say it's another smidgeling of evidence of the Russians trying to kill civilians. And there's, of course, a lot more hardcore evidence out there of civilians being straight up massacred by the Russians like there was in the Bucha Hostomel Irpin area. We're now going to be moving to the Seversky Donets River on the northern part of the finger, and we can see here that the Ukrainians were once again hitting the Russians with all they got here in this film. This appears to be a DJI, I'm not entirely sure, but we can see it looking down into this tree line, and we can see what appears to be the remains of a Russian vehicle out there in the field, although I'm not entirely sure right now. The drone is surveying the tree line, and I cannot see anything of note at the moment. I'm trying to see if we can change the graphics quality, but this is apparently about as good as it gets. Okay, now we can see what appears to be the remains of a destroyed T-72, I believe? It looks like it most likely be a T-72. Oh, now we can see the turret. That's what's out in the field, is the turret of the T-72B3. So it looks like it had a little bit of a turret toss. Sadly, we couldn't rate how good the toss was. All we could see is the aftermath, but it did get a pretty good distance. That would at least qualify in the javelin throwing competitions. Get what I said there? Now the drone is moving further up the line and looking down into the trees once more. I think it's looking for the next destroyed Russian vehicle. And it appears that this drone has been sent out to survey and collect information on the kind of losses that the Russians have taken in terms of vehicles. We don't see it really trying to identify, soldiers who have taken a nap. We see it really trying to find the vehicles. And it appears that it found one T-72B3 so far, and is now getting another angle of that destroyed tank. And then the video ends. And so as far as this video is concerned, and from what we can tell, it appears that the Ukrainians were able to destroy a single T-72B3, and thoroughly. If we go back and look at the destruction on that hull, you can actually see that the V12, I believe it uses a V12 engine, was blown out of the back and is sitting there outside of the back of the tank. So pretty much the rear hull of the vehicle was literally just blown to pieces, and the turret then went flying forwards into the field and crashed about 100 yards in front of, well, really about 50 to 70 yards in front of it, I would say. So a pretty decent flight time, I would say. And I don't know how high it got, but it definitely flew far. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this bit of news and on to today's news from the Seversky Donetsk River, where we can see the Ukrainians doing their best to lay out minefields to, of course, slow the Russians if they were to ever try and cross the river. Here's that footage right here, with a neat intro. They're driving through a impromptu blockade. Now see them prepping to go into the field. And now they're getting out the old glories, the mines. Couldn't really tell you if that was a Russian or a Ukrainian helicopter. They're now getting the mines out of the back of the trucks and placing them around. Just in case that's copyrighted, we're going to have to mute that. Now they're digging little holes to, of course, place the mines in. Usually, when you plant mines like this in the middle of the summer, they usually are able to harvest around the winter time. Usually at that point, they sprout these things called tanks, usually charred, but of course incredibly nutritious to the soil, as that iron helps to make strong wheat and spinach in the future. Of course, I'm kidding about all of that, but you can see them here placing the mines into this field, which is a very smart move, especially in the summer when Russian tank formations are going to be spread out amongst these fields and will be driving through them. In the winter and the fall, however, this would not be a smart thing to do, as the Russians would not be moving through the fields due to Rasputitsa and would be relegated to the roads, making it more advantageous to plant the mines onto the roads themselves. Wait a minute, hang on. Let's go back here. I think that they just came under fire, but let's unmute this and see. I can't really tell you if they did, but the man ducked down onto the ground like they were. The music is just so loud, it's really hard to tell. Now, Noob, I wanted to address this real quick. Noob145, I know what you're saying. Whenever a joke is explained, it does become unfunny. But one thing that Matthew and me have learned while running this channel is that sometimes we say things as jokes and somehow they come off seriously, and so I have to make sure to explain them as a joke. Otherwise, there may be a load of people who took us seriously. One time, we actually made a joke about replacing the bald eagle with a honey badger, and we were not serious about that at all, but we actually had a decent amount of people think we were serious in that statement, and so now we kind of give disclaimers whenever we say a joke that they're jokes, so that way we don't have hundreds of people getting enraged that we were apparently trying to peddle that as true. So just letting you know why we do that. Wait a minute. It looks like we just saw the fruits of Ukrainian labor. Apparently, the harvest is ripe in the midsummer, as they already got a BMD-4. You now see the explosion of another vehicle in the distance. Now we can see the destroyed Russian tanks that most likely have run over these mines, and the mine layers once again, out in the field having a lot of fun laying in the bushes. That's the end of the video, but it is interesting to see the 80th Air Assault Brigade, I believe. Let me make sure. The 80th Air Assault Brigade. Yes, that is what it is. The 80th Air Assault Brigade laying out mines, and on top of that, the efforts they go through, they're laying it so close to Russian forces that they can see them laying out the mines and fire at them, but at the same time, the Russians don't make a note of where that minefield was, and then the armored units just roll over them and end up, eating the dirt, pretty much. Well, really eating the explosive filler. But still, it's crazy to me to think that that's actually happening. And that kind of puts an extra level to the Russian stupidity, is that some infantry unit just watch the Ukrainians lay out the mines, and then they don't even relay the information to anyone else about, hey, we saw the Ukrainians out here carting around mines and playing around in the dirt, and so there must be a minefield there. They don't, because then the Russians will drive right through them. So with that, that's the end of the video. Great to see the 80th Air Assault Brigade once again doing what it does best, which is screwing with the Russians. And we're now going to move down further on the front line, more towards Lysychansk, in the area of Zolotarivka, where we can then see the Foreign Legion on the move here in this film, apparently doing their effort to evacuate civilians. Also, notice the Camel cigarettes. Very nice. Anyways, here's the video.
Yes, no, yes? Yeah. Come on, давай. Go on. It's gonna be tight. Holy fuck. We're not taking the whole... Sabachka? Давай, давай, get the fucking dog. Okay.
See them trying to get the civilians.
How about this? What? Women? Where's it all gonna go? Women now. Sorry, Lushka. These two? Come on.
The artillery's coming in.
Do we want to assist them? What can we do? No, we've got civilians. These guys. Fuck!
Oh, okay, whatever. We're just gonna keep it moving.
We good, love. Feel how fresh that is for your family.
We now see the Foreign Legion soldiers handing out food.
Thank you.
Which forgives what they just did a second ago, which just freaked me out. I was like, wait, I hadn't made it that far into the video, and so I didn't know it, and I guess there's no harm done because 2.4 thousand people have upvoted this on Reddit, so a lot of people have seen this, but I have never seen the brazenness, and I do have to give a quick little lecture on this, to sit there and literally film the sign of the town. Let me show you all that. Bakhmut. I've never seen anything like this. No, I have to give a huge lecture on this. There's a huge thing that we weigh into this channel, which is making sure that locations and informations of Ukrainian forces and what they're doing isn't being given out willy-nilly. And I have to say that while these Foreign Legion members are well-hearted, well-purposed, and they're, of course, great people for going to fight in Ukraine, one always does have to be incredibly smart about giving out information like this, as it can lead to their quick demise, and also the demise of the civilians that they just saved, letting the Russians know that they were driving down a road that led from the Seversky area down towards Bakhmut, and they can now see what kind of force numbers are traveling down that road based off of the montage, and also the sign. Now, I just saw someone say, you paused this. Yes, I did, because it was already shown, and if anyone was watching this, they would have already seen the sign and would have read it. So I'm just pointing this out because the mistake has already been made by the film crew who was filming this, and while well-intentioned and well-purposed, always have to be very careful about this kind of stuff because it can lead to a lot of people getting hurt. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news a little bit further down, where, on day 153, we saw the Ukrainians destroying an unrecoverable BTR-82. Sometimes the Russians abandon vehicles in perfect running condition, but that doesn't mean that the Ukrainians can salvage every single one of them. The Ukrainians found within this tree line an abandoned Russian BTR-82, but due to the situations they found themselves in, they couldn't pull the tank out of the trees, and so they decided the best thing to do was to destroy it. And so here's the video of them going through the effort of taking it out.
Москальський бетер.
The Z's are painted on the side, and we can see here that is definitely an unrecoverable BTR. I don't know if you can see it, Matthew, but this thing is about to become a submarine in a special underground operation.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah. So we can kind of get the idea now of why this is unrecoverable.
Гранаток, залили топлива, вверх трошки полили, зарядили РПГ, знайшли 2 труби. І зараз ми його будемо отрабатувати. Вот.
Now they've set a small little fire inside the BTR-82, and it looks like they just created a brand new crock pot. Or a pressure cooker. I would say it's more of a pressure cooker. Let me know in the comments what y'all think. Is this a crock pot or a pressure cooker?
От зараз ми його з РПГ лупанемо.
Now they've hit the pressure cooker with an RPG, well, some kind of an AT gun, AT weapon. Couldn't really tell you what it was. We hardly saw it.
Пошли. Чітко отработали, оце красавчик.
Okay, it was an RPG-7.
Вот моя бойовая команда возвращається.
Now they're leaving the area.
Задання. Все відпрацьовано. Всі живі, здорові. Підарунки несем на базу.
When you see one of them goofing off, of course. And that's the end of the video. It's great to see that the Ukrainians are in high morale, but sadly they couldn't save that vehicle because it got caught in the sand pit. And everyone knows that the worst thing to do was to drive a BTR-82 or any kind of armored vehicle into the mud. The Russians didn't learn that at the very start of the war, and it looks like even now they didn't learn it, as the Ukrainians saw what they did and just had to wind up destroying it. So much wasted product, so much wasted potential, and once again, the Russians are at it, destroying their own stuff and the Ukrainians. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this area of the Luhansk finger, I guess you could call it, and we're now going to be moving down into the Bakhmut, Svitlodarsk, and Alchevsk area. But before we get there, we're going to take another pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into our last bits of news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up, we have a $50 super chat from Alton Riggs, who does not leave a comment. But Alton, thank you very much for that very generous support. And I'm sure the Enforcer has some words to add to it, so I'll let him take it from here.
And of course, I do, Alton Riggs. I thank you so much for the support, because, of course, without it, we can't keep the lights on. And then these amounts of support that y'all give us are the only things that keep us going. Because without it, we, of course, have to find a way to eat and to pay our bills and to make sure we keep on going to college. And so we would have to go and get normal jobs, and then that wouldn't allow us to spend 60 hours a week or more working on this. And so I got to thank you so much, Alton Riggs, for enjoying the stream enough to support us like that, because it helps us to keep this thing on going, and without it, we wouldn't be able to. So thank you once again for the massive amount of support. It helps us out a whole load, and we're incredibly appreciative of your support. And so with that, we are on to the next question, and thank you once again.
All right, and moving on, we have a $20 super chat from JK, who says, this is for the weekly coffee and donuts fund. It's Mike Tyson approved.
Hey, well, I thank you so much for the support, JK. Did he just say the fund for all funds?
He said the weekly coffee and donuts fund.
Oh, I thought, well, I don't know why I'm stuttering.
I think you jumped ahead. I think you jumped ahead to another super chat.
I did, actually. I was thinking about that one in my head. But the coffee and donuts fund, Mike Tyson approved? That's a bit of a stretch. I don't know, because if Mike Tyson was here right now, he would say he's the best of the best, and this is the best coffee and donuts that he's ever had in his life. The taste is impregnable, the drinks are impenetrable, they're just delicious. And so thank you so much once again for the support. Make sure to come see Mike Tyson on Fight Night. I guess, I don't know. And with that, thank you once again for the support. We're going to go bite off of Vanda Holyfield's ear now because I find that tastier than a donut. And so with that, we're on to the next question. And thank you once again so much for the support.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from W, who says, great use of esprit de corps. I never catch you live, but I listen every day since the beginning. You and your brother do a fantastic job. And thank you very much for the support and for the compliment.
And thank you so much for the support. And I'm glad that you do enjoy these streams. And I go, one second, before I address your comment entirely, I just want you to observe with me that the chat is now blowing up with people saying cringe and I liked it and other things. You know, there's a lot of mixed feelings about Mike Tyson. I tried to roll it back a little bit because I remember last time I did it, someone said that it sounded like Mike Tyson was on the short bus, which I honestly kind of got hurt by a little bit because I was like, come on, it's not that bad. So I tried to ease it back a little bit this time, but it appears that some people found it cringe. But anyways, enforcers, you don't want that imitation popping up in future political campaigns. Why not? With that, now to get back to addressing your comment, I thank you so much for the support, and I think it's really cool that a lot of people make it kind of like a pilgrimage to get on these streams and watch them live. We actually have a massive audience that watches these streams when they're not live. About half of our viewership now comes from after the stream uploads to a video. We get, to break it down analytically, we get usually around 35 to 45,000 views while the stream is running, and then once they go off, we could get anywhere in between another 30 to 40,000 views off stream. And that's really crazy to me because we have as many people watching the stream after it's over as there are people watching it when it's running, and I think that's honestly a high honor, and it's really cool to me that those people, all those tens of thousands of people who watch this stream when it's not live, kind of make it a pilgrimage and kind of make it a thing to eventually get onto the stream itself and watch it. And so I thank you so much for the support and enjoying these streams. And I know you're not in the live chat, but to all of y'all in the future who are watching this after it's becoming a normal YouTube video, thank you all so much for enjoying the content, because while y'all aren't on the live streams, and, you know, of course, it's very hard to mention y'all because of that, I still think it's wonderful that y'all find this as a reliable source of news, and I'm highly honored by that. And so thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and thank you once again to everyone who watches this stream after it becomes a video. And so with that, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the remainder of the news. And so with that, what is the last question of this segment?
And for the last question of this segment, we have a $20 super chat from Fuzz the Cat, who says, Fuzz the Cat. And they put along a interesting song here. They said 10 occupiers hanging on the wall, 10 occupiers hanging on the wall. And if one occupier should accidentally fall, there will be 9 occupiers that hanging on the wall.
Well, thank you very much for the support. Taz the Cat?
Fuzz the Cat.
Fuzz the Cat. For some reason, Taz sounded like it was. But thank you very much for the support, Fuzz the Cat. And also, thank you for that interesting little song right there. It's an interesting one. I'd actually like to figure out, could I play that on accordion? And I know a lot of y'all are asking when the bagpipe mixtape will come out. It will come out eventually. I don't know when. I haven't honestly played the bagpipes in months. Well, really years at this point now that I think about it. But I do think that I could eventually rear up the pipes. The one thing I'm scared of, though, is disrupting the neighbors. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I like that you threw in the little song, and of course you always do the little Fuzz the Cat thing, and of course both Matthew and me find it pretty funny, and thank you once again. And so with that, we have now reached the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat tonight, do not worry, we do answer all of them before the end of the stream, but we're now going to start moving on to the remainder of the news that we have for the night. And so, without further ado, let's get right to it near the Bakhmut area, where we've seen that a command post was destroyed today by the 228th Battalion of the 127th Brigade. Quite a mouthful of numbers right there, but still, the results are in the pudding. And so here's the pudding. We'll have to mute it. When we see the soldiers moving along, you can see them. You can actually see that this footage... Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. The footage at the beginning was new. But this is the footage that we've seen before. And so apparently they found out that the Ukrainians, this Ukrainian brigade had moved up to the river to destroy a command post on the other side. And so the question now is, why did the Ukrainians fire on the other side? It was to get to the Russian command post, which is really interesting. I did not know that, and that adds a whole new layer to this video that we didn't know before. So with that, that's the end of this video, and it's cool to know that we've got kind of like a follow-up on this video and a little bit of additional footage telling us what exactly this attack was about, and it was actually the Ukrainians destroying a command post on the other side of the river. And so with that, we're now going to be moving behind the lines for a second, and please, entertain me for a moment as we look at a lubricant storage facility that was destroyed and burning somewhere in the Alchevsk area. Here's the video. That's the end of the video, but once again, nice little fire. We don't know what caused it, but it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still wreaking havoc and massive amounts of damage on Russian supplies further behind the lines. Every bit of Russian supplies destroyed is less than the Russians can do on the front. With that, we're now going to be moving back to the front and more close to the Svitlodarsk area, where we've seen the Russians firing a mortar. And I wanted to show y'all this video because I noticed something incredibly interesting about this mortar unit. You see them setting up the mortar. They seem to act like they don't really... Oh, nice Rolex, by the way. I don't know where he got that from. But honestly, it seems like they're very unfamiliar with how this thing is used. It's like they're just learning it right now. Now, I want y'all to notice another thing. Notice this guy's footwork over here. Also, notice this. Notice that right there. You see that? That's him not lining up the mortar round exactly with the tube. He then adjusts it, and then drops it. And then look at his footwork again. A lot of confused little steps. And we'll watch that one more time because there's a point I'm about to make with this. Also notice another thing. They didn't even plant the mortar into the ground well enough. Because once this first mortar round fired, the whole entire mortar popped up out of the ground, pretty much, and readjusted itself at an even higher elevation, throwing off what they're firing at. So let's look at that again. Pop! And it just entirely adjusted to a new angle. Probably like another 3 degrees to 5 degrees upwards. But there's a lot to be learned from this mortar crew and how they're working, because while I have never served in the military, I will tell y'all I have fired a mortar. Not to get into a lot of details, but my reenacting group specifically has a 3-inch Stokes mortar, and while it's not the actual army, we try and practice World War I artillery drill, mortar drill, as best we can, and we have looked into how to fire these things, and what this guy is doing here is wholly inefficient, and it appears that they don't really have a lot of experience with firing these mortars. The man who hangs the round doesn't move, at least in World War I drill for a 3-inch Stokes. Someone brings him the round, he then hangs it and then drops it. And all of this moving and stuff is just going to wear him out because they fire a load of rounds, and all of this little fumbling and tumbling over there, it just is inefficient. It's wasting time, and it's awful. And you can even find examples of this with American mortar units, where the guy who hangs the rounds sits right on top of the tube itself. And so while I don't have any military experience to speak of, and I know that reenacting experience isn't really military experience, but based off of the drill we follow there, this is wholly inefficient, and it appears that they are untrained even to us reenacting groups, which I have to tell y'all have an abysmal fire rate. Now they pick up the mortar, and now they run off. And honestly, they're literally carrying it exactly like we would in the reenacting group. Someone takes the base plate, someone takes the bipod, the other person takes the tube. The tube for a 3-inch Stokes is like 50-something pounds, which isn't really that heavy compared to most mortars, but still, once you pick that thing up, you never really realize how heavy metal is compared to anything else until like 50 pounds is in this very compact size compared to what you would normally carry. But still, they go running off. And what's he gonna do? A white glove inspection in the middle of the war? This guy, hey Matthew, this guy just came right out of the Russian Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and switched out of his dress uniform but forgot to take off the white gloves. Now, I gotta say, I have a little bit of experience, enough experience with mortars in the reenacting group to know that that's just not efficient at all. We operate like that, and we only fire the mortar about 2 or 3 times a year. And these soldiers right here are supposedly Russian contract soldiers, probably in the military for supposedly 3 to 4 years, and they still have no idea how to fire a mortar. A terrible failing on training, and it shows you how inexperienced and how unprepared and unequipped the Russians are for actually fighting a war. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Svitlodarsk area, because while we have gotten some videos from the Bakhmut and Svitlodarsk areas, we haven't heard of any Russian advances or any kind of heavy Russian activity to speak of, and so these areas largely remain unchanged. Moving on down to the Donetsk area, we did see something really interesting that the Ukrainians pulled off in the Bodanovsky district of the city of Donetsk. They apparently struck an oil depot and caused a pretty sizable fire there. And so, without further ado, let's observe this wonderful bonfire.
Блять, хуёво дерево, блять, не видно.
Жесть.
It's a nice smoldering fire, to say the least. And it continued on into the middle of the day. So that's the end of the video, and it's pretty nice and interesting to see that the Ukrainians struck an oil depot, and the Russians, of course, were unsuccessful in putting it out. Now, that's not really surprising. We've never seen the Ukrainians nor the Russians really put out oil depot fires. They're almost impossible to control. You can try and contain them, but actually putting them out is a whole other story, and I've never seen anyone succeed at that so far. But still, nice to see that the Ukrainians are destroying oil reserves behind the lines, and hopefully this will have an impact on the Russians, although they produce so much oil, it may not, considering that a lot of it isn't being exported anymore. With that, we're now out of the Donetsk city area, and we're now going to be moving down to a town that y'all have never heard about, and actually got its first bit of news for the first time. The village of Volodar had Russian Ka-52s flying over it today, and also firing off unguided rockets. And so here's the video of these helicopters trying to uproot the Ukrainian forces from their positions, but of course are unsuccessful every time. You see another Ka-52 firing off its rockets.
Где он делся, второй? А, они в балку залетели, походу, да? Да. Ну да, они с балки, хоп, такой вышел.
Also, Durka, while we're watching these, this little video here of these Russian Ka-52s firing, if you would like to hear about the Antonovsky Bridge, go to the very beginning of the video, because we had a very long segment talking about that specific event today. A lot of Ka-52s are in operation in this area, like 3 or 4 of them. But you'll see that they dare not come up above the tree lines, because if they did that, they'd be in some pretty bad business.
Это что было? Это по ним фигачат. Это ПВО промазало только что. Вот, братан, полетел.
Hang on. Someone just identified this wrong, because the video title says Ka-52s. That's clearly an Mi-28. So it may be a mix of Ka-52s and Mi-28s, but that's one of the few that we've seen up close.
Не берет украинская, пофиг вообще.
Бля, как тихо, слышишь?
Ну да, тихо, очень тихо.
You can now see another Mi-28.
Главное, чтобы вышли все.
And that's definitely a Ka-52 back there.
Ну, он сейчас последний уже.
So far we've been able to see 2 Mi-28s and a Ka-52. The other 2 we couldn't really tell if they were Ka-52s or Mi-28s. But that's the end of the video, and that's about one of the largest amounts of Russian helicopters firing off unguided rockets in a single area we've ever seen. I don't really know if this indicates any kind of an increase in action, if it's showing like the Russians are doing some kind of probing attack or planning on some kind of an assault there, but that's all the news we have from the area, and going off of it, all we could see was an incredibly large helicopter barrage conducted by the Russians. Moving further on down the front lines, we've heard some news from some of the most famous, and I guess you could call controversial units that the Ukrainians have fielded. Of course, once you look into their history, they were controversial at the start, but as time has gone by, they've largely weeded out the, I guess you could call, unsavory elements with the unit. But we have seen the Azov unit destroying various Russian vehicles in Vavarivka, in the southern front. This is apparently the Kharkiv unit of the Azov battalion, which you would think, wow, that would be reasonable if they, say, you know, wound up in Kharkiv. But no, there's been kind of a weird change of events here. The Azov battalion from Kyiv actually got moved to Kharkiv, and the Kharkiv Azov battalion got moved down here to the southern front. So, here's the video of the Kharkiv Azov unit fighting near Vavarivka in the southern front. We can see here a technical and a Shtav. And we see the Azov unit laying down the artillery fire on top of them. And that artillery fire is as deadly accurate as it's ever been. Now a little BMP-2 has decided that they're going to try and brave this dangerous area. And now it's pulled over on the side of the road. Now the Azov, of course, is giving us the credit of letting us know that's a Russian vehicle. And we can see another one right there. This one appears to be a BMP. I'm not particularly sure what kind it is. But we can see that BMP get rocked, the side skirt went flying, but I didn't see a turret toss. But that BMP is definitely out of it. And that's the end of the video. But it's good to see that the Ukrainians, specifically the Azov battalion in the area, does not play when it comes to destroying Russian units. I just saw someone actually say that Shtav means headquarters in Ukrainian, so thank you very much for letting me know. So we saw them destroy 2 Russian vehicles and also a headquarters. Very nice to see, and I hope that the Azov Kharkiv unit in the southern front continues this kind of activity. But beyond that, we haven't gotten any news from the southern front line at all. This area of the front line has been the quietest for the longest, and while we get the occasional reports of activity and firefights in this area, by and large, almost nothing happens. Moving on down into Mariupol, though, I'm going to show you all a bit of a sobering scene of what life has been like in Mariupol for the past 2 months after the battle has ended. And so here's the video of 2 kids taking a cameraman to their grandmother's former house.
Направляемся к дому моей бабушки, которая раньше тут жила, когда еще все было хорошо, отлично. И сейчас мы покажем вам, как плохо стала ее квартира. Нас предупредил таксист, что здесь еще не разминировано, валяются мины, растяжки, что ходить опасно. Вот, ребята, что с домом моей бабушки. Вот это называется закрытый подъезд. Приблизись. Вы гляньте, ребята. Вон, вот там вот тут, вон второй этаж, бабушкин балкон.
Давай аккуратно. Давайте уж фонарик включу, подождите.
Просто чисто пепел. И больше ничего.
Одна керамика осталась целая. Остальное все посгорало, даже металл.
That's the end of the video, and once again, the entire city of Mariupol looks like that. Something like 95 to 99% of all of the buildings in Mariupol were razed to the point that they're unlivable in, and in normal terms would be condemned for people to live in. Yet, the entire city has looked like this for months, and the Russians have done nothing to rectify the situation. In fact, the Russians have tried to bulldoze some areas of the town and start to build the dream beach resort that they've always wished for. On top of the thousands, the tens of thousands of civilians and soldiers, both Russian and Ukrainian, that have died in this very area. We're now going to be moving out of the city of Mariupol, and we're now, having covered all of the news, going to move north to Kyiv, where we don't have a speech from President Zelensky. And so we're going to real quick pull up the President of Ukraine, which will take us to the website of the President of Ukraine right here. We click on this link, we go to videos, video collection, and here on the 26th of July is the speech from President Zelensky. And so without further ado, I'm going to unmute this, throw up the subtitles, and also put that up here. And so, here is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on July 26th of day 153 of the war.
Українки, незламні народи найсильнішої країни. Сьогодні окупанти знову вдарили по Одеській області. Знову ракетами по звичайних будинках. Ракетами, які призначені для знищення військових кораблів та інших значимих цілей. Саме такою важкою зброєю російська армія руйнує звичайний приватний сектор поблизу моря. Люди там жили, відпочивали. І ми за це будемо обов'язково бити у відповідь, щоб там не брехало про такі удари російське Міністерство оборони. Постійний російський терор Харкова і області, Миколаєва, міст і сіл Запорізької області, Дніпропетровщини, Донбасу, прикордонних районів Сумщини і Чернігівщини. Все це окупантам просто так не минеться. Вже 4 місяці російська держава не повідомляла своїм громадянам жодної інформації, навіть відцензурованої, про втрати окупаційного контингенту. Повне мовчання. Нічого не публікувалося і не говорилося в численних інтерв'ю і виступах на політичному і військовому рівнях. Втім, це число вже майже 40 тисяч. Стільки людей російська армія втратила убитими за час від 24 лютого, а ще десятки тисяч поранених, скалічених. І якщо російська держава не говорить цього офіційно і навіть у загальних рисах, то це означає, що кожен і кожна, хто ще зберіг будь-які контакти в Росії чи інформаційний вплив на їхнє суспільство, має доносити цей простий факт до тих, до кого може. 40 тисяч одних тільки убитих окупантів. Сьогодні стало відомо, що Британія розширила санкційний список проти Росії, додала ще десятки людей і організацій. Це правильна тенденція. Я вдячний Британії за незмінну твердість в санкційних питаннях. Це приклад, який варто наслідувати і усім іншим в західному світі. Зокрема, сьогоднішні повідомлення про чергове спровоковане зростання газових цін на європейській біржі вище $2000 за 1000 кубів. Це вже достатній привід, щоб розширити санкції проти Росії. Оскільки для всіх зрозуміло, що це свідомий ціновий терор Росії проти Європи. Використовуючи «Газпром», Москва робить все, щоб ця зима стала для європейських країн найбільш жорсткою. На терор потрібно відповідати санкціям. Сьогодні вперше в історії міждержавних відносин України та Уругваю провів переговори з паном президентом цієї латиноамериканської держави, подякував за підтримку в міжнародних організаціях і закликав Уругвай, як і інших в регіоні Латинської Америки, запроваджувати санкції проти Росії. Зробимо все, щоб у світі не залишилось жодного регіону, де б не розуміли правди про російську агресію. Вже маємо комунікацію з Чилі, Парагваєм, Коста-Рікою і ось тепер Уругвай. Продовжимо цю роботу. І ще декілька знакових подій, про які варто, мені здається, сказати. Сьогодні в Лондоні за участі прем'єр-міністра Бориса Джонсона відбулася церемонія нагородження премією Уінстона Черчилля за лідерство. Я вважаю, що це відзнака усім нашим героям, усім нашим людям, усім нам, хто кожен на своєму рівні протистоїть тиранії. І для мене було дійсно честю приймати цю премію. Сьогодні ж у Нідерландах, країні, заради розуміння якої ми дуже довго працювали, український народ відзначили ще однією нагородою, спеціальною нагородою нідерландської незалежності. Від імені українців її отримав наш посол. Зокрема, і ці знакові речі відображають кардинальні зміни у ставленні до України, які відбулись у світі. Наша сміливість дійсно надихає усі вільні нації і загалом спільноту демократичних держав. І лише уявіть, як надихатиме українська перемога. Ввечері підписав указ про нагородження наших воїнів, 198 учасників бойових дій, відзначені державними нагородами України. 2 з них посмертно. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав життя за Україну. Вічна слава усім, хто воює за незалежність нашої держави. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of President Zelensky's speech here on day 153 of the war, rounding out today's news, and also rounding out the Tuesday night news segment for us as well. If you are new to this stream, I thank you so much for watching. The stream's not over just yet. We will be moving into a question segment where we're going to answer everyone's super chats and as many live chats as we can as well. But I once again want to thank you all so much for enjoying this news, and I hope you found it very educational and interesting tonight as to what's going on in the war. If you did enjoy it and you would like to see more of it, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, because we run these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays, and we also upload daily summary videos as well, about 5 hours before the streams, showing some of the highlight videos and highlight points to take away from today's fighting. And so with that, thank you all so much once again, and we're now going to move into the question segment and answer all of the super chats that have been sent in, and also answer as many live chats as possible, because I want everyone to know that you do not have to pay to have a question answered. The only reason you should pay is if you enjoy this stream and you want to help us keep running, and of course, if you'd like to throw in a question, we'll make sure to get to it to thank you for helping us to keep on running. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up, we have a very generous $100 super chat from Stephen Wheeler, who says, keep up the good work.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Stephen Wheeler. And whenever I read Wheeler as the last name, I don't know if it's just me, but I always want to say Wheeler, you know, kind of like Who-Whip. But I thank you.
It's like Stewie.
Yeah, but I thank you so much for the support, Stephen, and I'm glad you enjoy it so much. And we're going to keep up the good work as best as we can and keep this thing going until the end of the war. So with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support. That does help us to keep up the good work. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you once again, Stephen Wheeler. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $50 super chat from Sasha Hendricks, who says, hello, I want to endorse Sign My Rocket again. It is legit service that leaves you with a sense of having actual impact. I received my shell picture weeks ago. Other than that, you both are doing the good deed, and it may take all day to prepare. Thanks.
And I thank you so much for the support, Sasha. And I would have to say, we are talking to someone who is involved with the Sign My Rocket program right now, and we are seeing about doing some very interesting things in the future. We're not going to touch on the exacts right now, but we are seeing about trying to get that to come to be. But I'm just going to let everyone know, this stuff is a little bit of a slow progress in the background. The plan I have right now is one of the first times we've ever done this for the channel. And so it may take some while, but we are looking at doing something really cool with it. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. And I do agree, the Sign My Rocket is incredibly interesting, and I think it's a really cool concept. Also, the profits from it go to a non-profit organization in Ukraine, and I think that's pretty neat. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support, Sasha. And thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, I want to recognize a $20 super chat from Sharon Tukolsky, a longtime channel supporter, but does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Sharon, for the support. We appreciate you watching, and we appreciate you supporting the channel. And moving on, we have a $14 super chat from Anthony K. Smith, who says, hey guys, I'm here every day, but I watch you through my smart TV while working, so I can't log in. I do go to my other pewter and hit the like, though. Great work.
Well, thank you so much for the support. And of course, it's really cool to hear that a lot of people do watch through the smart TVs. That's something I never really think about because I always watch YouTube on my computer. But there are loads of people out there who watch this on TV. And just for y'all to know, there is 3 people who have met me in person that knew me from this channel. And they've actually met me, and they've become very good friends. I've met them a couple of times, and they're incredibly nice people, much like almost all of y'all are. But there are a couple of angry people out there who have obsessed over this channel, and they still dwell, although they have been hidden from the chat. But still, getting beyond that, I do think it's really interesting that I met them in person. Can you reread that live chat real quick, Matthew? Because I actually got sidetracked for a second by something in the chat. So could you read that again?
Anthony said, I'm here every day, but I watch you through my smart TV while working, I can't chat.
I remember.
And
now.
I go to my other pewter and hit the like, though.
I remember now. Speaking of them, they watch through their TV, and so they never comment much. But I always think that's cool that people actually gather around the TV sometimes and just watch the show like it's a nightly news thing, kind of like how old news channels used to be, like say CBS in the 50s or the 60s. Although a lot of mainstream news has gone down the drain these days. But still, I thank you so much for enjoying it, Anthony K. Smith. And regardless whether you're able to comment often or whether you're watching it on the TV or hitting the like on another computer, I thank you so much for enjoying this stream and helping us keep it running, because of course that helps us out a massive deal, and without support from our viewers this wouldn't be possible. So thank you once again, Anthony K. Smith, for being a longtime Lee Spring Army veteran and also helping us to keep the fire burning. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again, Anthony, for the wonderful amount of support.
And just real quick, I had to go 10 feet back, but did that come through?
It did. It actually did.
Nice. All right, and moving on to the next super chat, we have a $14 donation from Zwan Wu, who says, "Hey Enforcer, has there been any new info on the equipment and Bushmasters that Australia provided being used inside Ukraine? And all the best."
Can you reread that one real quick? Because I saw something in the chat, and I think we might have to address that in a minute again, but could you reread that?
Zwan said, "Hey Enforcer, has there been any new info on the equipment and Bushmasters that Australia provided being used inside Ukraine?"
Unfortunately not. We haven't heard a lot about the Bushmasters ever since the past 2 months. News has pretty much fallen off completely about them. We do know they're there. There's about at least more than 30 of them within Ukraine, but we do know that one of them was destroyed in the Bakhmut area. We did get footage of that Bushmaster burning, but sadly we don't have a lot of news about them beyond that. But we do know they're there, and I have to say, I think they're one of the coolest armored vehicles that the Ukrainians have gotten in the war in terms of looks. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and sadly there's just not a lot to talk about because the news isn't really there. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support.
And what was it you're wanting to address, Enforcer?
Oh, yeah. I would like to address this real quick. I understand that there is a lot of channels out there that cover the Ukraine war and talk about, you know, things like this and contribute. But also another thing is that I've noticed that over time, because at the beginning I just allowed people to do that, over time we almost had like channel advertisers coming into our live chat and trying to advertise other people's streams. And it started to come to the point where they would be like, "Hey, this channel sucks, come check out so-and-so guy." And so we kind of have a rule where we don't allow other channels to be promoted. We allow a certain few, like Starsky, to be promoted because he has come on here before, and we pretty much work hand in hand in reporting what's going on in Ukraine. But other channels, we largely dissuade against because I feel like it's now come to the point where those channels are just advertised in a way where everyone's like, "Hey, they suck, come to these other people," and that kind of is, you know, not really what we like. So with that, just wanted to cover that real quick. And also, Matthew, I would like if you could keep an eye out for that. I know you got a lot going on, but if anyone's out there trying to promote other channels, you know, and say we suck, go to another one, let's just make sure to keep an eye on that, and I'll also try and look out for it as well. So with that, we are on to the next question. I just wanted to get that out there because I saw that in the live chat, and I was like, nah, we're not going to let that slide. And so with that, on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Bash Girl, who says, "Thank you, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt. I listen to y'all every day except for Mondays. God bless y'all. I'm a proud LSA member. P.S. Great yeehaw, Matt." And yes, that was a pretty good yeehaw. It's always a good one whenever it actually goes through the mic. I had to step like 10 feet back, so I might want to mark that with some tape.
And I thank you so much for the support. I'm glad you do enjoy these little streams because we put a decent amount of effort into these. We actually had a lot that we had to get through before the stream today. We're not going to go into it, but it was a lot, and then we had to come back and start doing this right after that. But I thank you so much for enjoying them, and I'm glad you've been a Lee Spring Army veteran for a long time. I'm glad you're a proud member of this this army as well, because a lot of people are. We have thousands of people who have dedicated themselves as full-time Lee Spring Army members, and I find it a high honor that such wonderful people are a part of our community. And so thank you so much once again for supporting this stream and helping us to keep running and helping the Lee Spring Army to keep on marching. And so with that, I hope that has addressed the comment, and thank you once again for just enjoying these streams so much. It's a very nice thing that you said to us, and we always appreciate when we hear that people enjoy this stuff. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to Alan Billings for putting in a $10 super chat without a comment. So thank you very much, Alan, for that support. And we appreciate you very much. And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from R. May, who says, how big of a fool is Putin? Huge or just very large? And I would actually vote for the very large option.
Yeah, thank you very much for the support, R. May. To answer that, to make it a binary answer, I would say huge. I would have to go trump very large by a little and say huge, because the stuff... Bigly. Well, we're not going there, but I would say huge, because the stupidity that he exercises on a daily basis would have to be poorly misguided, poorly judged, and just very irrational. So I'd have to say the stupidity he exercises is huge. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one. But thank you once again, R. May, for helping us to keep the lights on.
Yes, and thank you very much for that support. And also, by the way, folks, we're not getting political. That was just a joke. I haven't seen the chat light up just yet, but I'm sure it will in a minute. So up next, we have a super chat from Anonymous, who puts in a $10 donation and says, congrats on 90,000 subscribers.
And thank you so much for the congratulations on 90,000 subscribers. We don't really make a big deal about surpassing another 10,000 subscribers, which is kind of a big deal. But because unfortunately, we're not really geared like that. You know, we don't like make a 90,000 or an 80,000 subscriber special. But it's incredible to know that so many people keep on flowing in and joining this Lee Spring Army. And I hope a lot of people are looking forward to the content we'll put out in the future. We did the government cheese video, but there was a lot of things learned from that original video. And hopefully, when the next one comes out, it'll be on a topic that is incredibly interesting to y'all. Also improves a little bit. We won't be trying to use as much stock footage as before, but also I want everyone to keep in mind when I talk about this stuff, it's incredibly expensive to get the licensing rights for actual footage. For example, World War II footage can cost hundreds of dollars for almost 20 seconds of film to get a license to show that on YouTube. So that's why a lot of channels revolve around stock footage, is because it's it's completely uneconomical to use real footage from the war, because it can be so expensive because most of it's privately owned. But I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy this channel and want us to keep on going. And hopefully we will be able to keep this going well past 90K and well into 100K, and also diversify what we talk about on this channel, so that way there's a broader content of news and information we're able to cover, and hopefully at the same quality or even better than what we're doing now, because the hope is to always improve. And so with that, thank you once again for the congratulations on the 90K, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Scrog CW, who says, keep up the good work.
And thank you, Scrog KW?
Scrog CW.
Scrog CW for the support. For some reason, your name was all gargled when I heard it. I think I just had a mini stroke right there, because I heard Scroll KW, not Scrog CW. But I thank you so much for the support. And of course, it helps us out a massive deal. And I'm glad you do enjoy this channel and want us to keep on running. If it wasn't for viewers like y'all who help to support this channel, it wouldn't be possible. And so thank you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Caffeine, who says, the best way to describe the Russian soldiers is as orcs from LOTR.
Caffeine? Caffeine, the Discord mod? Well, thank you very much for the support. That's crazy. The Discord mod threw in a super chat. Like that rarely happens. I think Crazy threw in one, and I know that Zach Jeffers throws in one often, but very rarely do other Discord mods throw in a super chat. So thank you so much, Caffeine, for all you do on the server, and also for the support as well. And to address that, can you reread that one more time just to make sure I can give Caffeine the full credit for his comment?
Caffeine said the best way to describe the Russian soldiers is as orcs from LOTR.
And I would have to agree, and I think that's why a lot of people, including the entirety of Ukraine, has started to call them orcs. And I have to say that by and large, they act like them with how they actually do things on the front. I don't know. I mean, like, Russian people by and large may be incredibly smart, but the smart ones certainly aren't in the army, because you can kind of see by the things they do that there are some screws missing or some brain cells that are absent upstairs. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, well, the comment, Caffeine. And I thank you so much for the support, for everything you've done on the Discord, as well as the super chat here in the comment as well. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And next up, a big shout out to WL for putting in a $10 super chat without a comment, but thank you very much for your support. And also, we have a $10 super chat from R. May. And sadly, I'm not going to be able to read that because it's pretty political, but we appreciate the support nonetheless. And it's unfortunate I can't read it because I would love to, because I'm a political science major, but we have to adhere to the chat rules. But thank you for the support once again. And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from Telmed, who says, no question tonight, but I am contributing to your pizza and sweet tea fund.
Hey.
That's a new fund.
Well, I thank you, Telmed, for the support. We now have a pizza and sweet tea fund. We have to get them as a combo now. And so I thank you so much for the support. We're going to put that towards a brand new fund, and we're going to have ourselves some pizza with some sweet tea. And as y'all know, my favorite pizza comes from Papa John's, and my favorite sweet tea is Milo sweet tea. If I was to get a store-bought one, you know, homemade sweet tea is fairly good all the time. So with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and thank you very much for opening up a brand new fund. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from BC Skyman. I'm just trying to make sure he didn't send in a chat along with it. I see he said above super sticker. I guess I'm the only one that uses them. Of course, not by choice. And the super chat sticker that he sent is a hippo wearing a yellow shirt that turns around and gives the peace sign and says victory.
Well, thank you very much for the support, BC Skyman, and also an interesting little super chat sticker. Now, if y'all didn't know, the hippo is actually one of the most dangerous animals in the wild. I don't know if y'all know that. They look cool. I mean, like, you know, if you pull
honey badger's pretty dangerous.
Honey badgers are dangerous, but hippos are deadly. This thing is literally a tank, pretty much. And honestly, I don't like how they look. You know, they look kind of goofy if you look at them right here. But these things are tanks, living tanks. They are incredibly scary as well. Y'all may not know it, but these things are, I believe, more closely related to the dolphin than anything. I'm not really sure if I'm correct on that. They're closely related to something more so than you would think. I think it may be the dolphin.
That thing's related to a dolphin?
Let me pull it up. What is the closest relative to the hippo? Oh, it was right there. There it is. Whales. Oh, yeah, that was the crazy thing. Whales. So it is close to a dolphin. Somehow, this thing is more similar to a whale than anything, at least DNA-wise. And
I just saw somebody in the live chat say, it looks like Lavrov.
Let's pull that up. Lavrov. Oh my God, it does. Look at that. Similarity striking.
That might be his mother.
Oh. Matthew just threw out the shade. Jesus. But yeah, that might be his mom. Mama Lavrov right here. But what's crazy about these things is that they are incredibly fast. Now, they don't look fast, but if you were running away from this thing on land, this thing could charge you, and not only charge you, but maul you to death. You can see the teeth in that thing. Kind of looks like, well, we won't say that. Well, I'm going to say this in advance. I don't want the British people to take this personally because I know this isn't true, but this looks like someone from Lincolnshire's teeth. I'm just kidding. I've been to Britain, and most of y'all have pretty clean and straight teeth. A lot of people are into teeth whitening over there, like we are in the U.S. But then again, I've seen a lot of people with some nasty sets of teeth here in Alabama. Wait a minute, these might be the meth labs out in the countryside. Oh no, I'm not getting a lot of comment from Matthew there. He's probably thinking I'm treading in danger.
Wait, what?
You know, like these teeth. You know, like
oh, that's about as bad as my other comment.
yeah. But anyways, with that, I hope y'all have enjoyed our short little aside on the hippo, and thank you so much, BC Skyman, for the super chat with a super sticker in it, for us to be able to go on such a silly tirade about the hippo. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, "This is the fund to fund all of the other funds, and cheers."
There it is. That's the comment I was thinking about earlier. The fund to end all funds. I would like if y'all would address the rest of the funds to the fund to end all funds. I think that's actually a pretty good one. It encompasses all of them because we have hundreds of them at this point. And I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for helping to fund the fund to end all funds. And with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Rockets Red Wines, who says, "I read the article that you wrote for Alabama Heritage about reenacting. It's good stuff. At what point do you think Desert Storm reenacting will become popular?"
Oh my god. Wow, man. Everyone, I want y'all to know that's a stalker right there, because that's true. And I don't know how you found it, but wow, that's some pretty high level searching right there. What are you, Nardwar? Like, like, what are you about to do next? Tell me about something I did in middle school? But, yeah, I did write an article. I don't know if you're, you've thrown a lot of questions into my head there, saying something that specific. But, yes, I did write an article on reenacting in the Alabama Heritage magazine. But to answer that question, I would say that Desert Storm reenacting, well, let me think. Desert Storm happened in the 90s. We're 30 years ahead. Vietnam happened in the 70s, so we're 50 years ahead of that. And Vietnam reenacting is just starting to begin. It's in its infancy right now. And so Desert Storm reenacting, give it... Oh, but that's a hard one, though, you see, because the thing with reenactors is that it's going to be really hard. This is why Vietnam reenacting is kind of having a hard time. It's really hard to find people to play convincing NVA or Viet Cong. And it's due to a million reasons. It's not just due to it's hard to find, like, you know, people who are willing to play that role, but it's just hard to find people for that. But, man, I'm trying to think. It would probably be about another 20 years from now, because we're already 30 years away from Desert Storm, so give it another 20. We'll probably see people doing that. I know of one guy here in Alabama who does have his uniform from Desert Storm, and he wears it around sometimes in certain events, but it is super rare. I think I've only seen it once. But I think that reenacting field would start to pick off in its infancy in about 20 years from now, if I had to give an estimate. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. Thank you for being a stalker, and I hope that does answer your question. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from Like Block, who says, "Greetings from Croatia, Enforcer. I hear some news from one Ukrainian military official that Ukraine can return all lost land in 8 to 10 weeks. Is that possible or just optimistic talk?"
I thank you very much for the support, and to answer that question, I think that may be optimistic talk. 8 to 10 weeks is only 2 to 2.5 months. And while I do know that, and while I do not know, but I'm incredibly certain that the Ukrainians can get all of the land back that they have lost, 2 to 2.5 months is an incredibly short timetable, and we're not seeing that kind of speed and that kind of progress to say that that would certainly happen. There's a lot of things that have to be overcome still by the Ukrainians to be able to defeat the Russians, and honestly, in my opinion, which may be wrong, so take it with a grain of salt, because I'm basing it off of how I'm looking at it, and I may be looking at it in the wrong way, I would say it would most likely take longer than 2 to 2.5 months. It'd most likely be around 4 months at the minimum. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are going to move on to the next one. And thank you once again for a really interesting question, actually.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, "The Brits did not understand that Americans were protecting what was theirs in 1776 Ukrainians are fighting for their independence, and the major powers are backing them just like France and Spain did us.
That's very true, and that's a pretty good point. But one thing that I have to say about the Revolutionary War, and while I'm a huge American patriot, and I believe entirely in what the United States is these days, and think it's a good engine of progress and hope and all kinds of stuff, I don't really see what the actual purpose of starting the Revolutionary War was. Because when you actually look at the historical context at the time, it seemed like it didn't really make a lot of sense, because when you look at everything surrounding it, I was like, what? So, to explain to everyone, the French and Indian War happened because colonial settlers here in the colonies were trying to expand outwards into the Ohio River Valley. But the French laid claim to the Ohio River Valley beforehand, and so it led to a fight that in the large term would be called the 7 Years' War, which a lot of people argue is the first world war in history. But here in America, it's known as the French and Indian War because we fought the French and the Indians, and we ended up winning. Well, specifically, the British ended up winning for us. And it was a costly war. This war wasn't just fought in the Americas, it was also fought in Europe on a massive scale. And it was all fought over the colonists here in America trying to expand westward. So the British did something that seemed pretty smart at the time, and they created this thing called the Proclamation Line, which stated that colonial settlers would not be able to move over into the Ohio River Valley, because although the British had been able to win it in the French and Indian War, there were still Indian tribes living there, and they didn't want to encroach on their land and just stomp them, through the settlers. And so they said, here's the Proclamation Line, no one cross. And so the colonists were kind of miffed by that, because even then, the kind of idea of manifest destiny was kind of there. It wasn't really called that yet, but it was still there. And then the British were like, man, this war that we fought for them because they were trying to expand out there was expensive, incredibly expensive, and it was fought for them. And of course, the entire burden of the colonies and what had just happened for them was being carried by just the British taxpayer. And considering that the colonies were sovereign land of the British, a territory, much like we would view Puerto Rico these days, it only made sense to raise taxes on the colonies and, of course, try and help pay off this incredibly expensive war through them. And for some reason, that was the line drawn in the sand for the colonies. And of course, they say no taxation without representation, but I kind of find that a little hypocritical these days, because we tax a lot of territories, the United States does, and they get no representation whatsoever in the matter. So I honestly didn't really get it, considering the war was fought for them, and that's really the only reason why the colonies didn't lose potentially a decent amount of holdings. I didn't really understand the reasoning for the start of the Revolutionary War, and it wasn't like the British were tyrants, and everyone's always talking about King George this, King George that. At that point in history, Britain as a government existed much like it does today, and the Parliament and the Prime Minister were the major powers within the British government, not really the king. And so I don't really know why that whole thing existed the way it was. When you look at it, it's like, well, there wasn't really a reason for it. But I'm glad it happened, because it allowed the United States to be an independent country, and also to become such a powerhouse, because under the British, it could be debated that America wouldn't have become such a powerhouse. And I could have seen a future where, this one's a really difficult one, because Spain was in decline at the time, but the Mexicans may have actually been able to become a pretty sizable power, or they may have remained Spanish. And then the Spanish would have almost an entirely homogenous, kind of like, I guess you could say, colonial holding in South America as well as Central America. And the British and the Spanish may have gotten into large wars in the future on the American frontier, I guess you could say. But still, that's all hypothetical, and there's really no information to back that up on. That's always an interesting alternate history I think about, is like, what did the British own almost all of North America as a single territory, I guess you say? Canada and the United States would have been one, practically, and then the Spanish controlled everything south, and then the Portuguese owned Brazil, but that's a whole other thing that doesn't really attach into that picture. But still, something interesting to me. So yeah, getting back to the whole Revolutionary War thing and talking about independence and freedom, since that's what the whole super chat was about, I can agree. The Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom in a way I think is more meaningful than the U.S. was at the time, because the U.S. wasn't really an independent country, or a country that existed at that time, didn't really have a national image at that point, or even a sense of unity. The colonies were entirely separate from each other, and we would see that idea carry over into the Articles of Confederation. But the Ukrainians, existing as an independent country with a semblance of a national identity, were invaded by a completely foreign power that is trying to crush that individual national identity and completely erase their country from the books. And I would have to say that that is something I consider far more pressing, I guess, is far more sympathetic than the Revolutionary War, in my opinion. And I believe that, at least in terms of foreign support, they are in the exact same position that the U.S. was in during the Revolutionary War, and I would have to agree with you there. If it wasn't for the French, primarily the French, and also the Spanish in a way, supporting the U.S. during the Revolutionary War, the U.S. wouldn't have won. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does weigh in on it, and, of course, an interesting standpoint as well. And so thank you so much for the support, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $50 super chat from David Carter, who says, I watch the stream every day on a 120-inch laser TV. No way to send or chat, so here, I made the effort to get on my phone at the same time just for it. Y'all gents do a great job. And thank you very much, David. And a laser TV? I've never even heard of that.
I've never heard of that either, but I thank you for the support, David. Let's pull that up. A laser TV. Laser TV. Images. Wow, good lord, is this what it is?
That is insane.
This is insane.
I've never even seen that before.
Yeah, I've never seen this before either. You're living the highlight out there watching it on a laser TV. Us folks don't have that kind of stuff, but golly, that's really cool. And so I thank you so much for the support, David Carter, helping us to keep on running this channel. And thank you for letting us know what one of these things is, because now that you've shown us this is cool. Like, this is like this would be like having a private theater back in the 30s with your own little projector. This is what this feels like right here in a modern form. And so with that, thank you once again, and thank you for hopping into the live chat just to give us some support and help this channel to keep on running, and also to put a big flex on everyone and telling everyone that you have a laser TV. And so with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again, David Carter, for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Phil Tatham, who says, Tyson, for the next guest on Sunday.
You know, I don't know if he would have a lot of interesting things to contribute to the Ukraine war, but as an idea on its surface, it would be cool to have Mike Tyson on a stream as a guest. I don't really know what we would talk about, considering this is a Ukraine war stream, but he's an interesting guy. A little crazy, but isn't everyone a little bit crazy? But still, pretty cool idea, and maybe we'll see about that in the future. I feel like I'd have to have millions of subs to do something like that, but maybe y'all can help me get to that point. So with that, thank you once again for the support. Pretty interesting idea, and with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from Mark Wootall, who says, keep up the good work, guys.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I do thank you for enjoying the work we keep on doing, and we're going to keep on trying to do it, and of course, with that support, we'll be able to. Our goal is to, of course, try and cover this war until the very end, and I think we'll be able to, and of course, thanks to y'all's support as well. Now, one thing I would like to cover real quick, and I know this is about to be a huge aside, Matthew, so please bear with me, because this may become a bit of a long stream, but Bill Deplorable said, at the Enforcer, to answer a live chat question real quick, do you discount the reasons listed for separating from Great Britain by the colonists in the Declaration of Independence? Let me pull up the Declaration of Independence real quick. And we're gonna make this a little quick, but once again, I kind of want to cover that in a little bit of detail since I kind of started this rabbit hole. We'll go to Wikipedia and see if they have a direct translation of it down here. All right, so let's go past the introduction to the preamble, which we've all read, into the indictment. Let's see, such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, blah, 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 and, you know, submitted to a candid world. Everyone knows that part. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. Just in case we all know, if y'all don't know, the Crown actually has the ability, still to this day, to give royal assent to laws, and this can actually be practiced in real life. The Queen has never refused to assent to laws, but in previous times, there have been some who have refused to assent to laws, which King George III has been one of them. But still, it is a governmental right. It's not necessarily something that's like, how dare you? That's like acting like it's unacceptable for a president to veto something. Now I'd be like acting like that about that. So I find that one to be a little bit unreasonable. He's forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he's utterly neglected to attend to them. That's kind of an opinion. I don't really feel like that's necessarily a truth. Because you see, the thing is that in modern government, we hear these exact same things being said about almost every single sitting president of the United States. And so is this more of a personal bias, a personal slant to what he's doing? I would say so. He's refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people will relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. That one's kind of a tough one because that's kind of talking about the whole colonies thing, and we, as the United States, have owned a decent amount of territories in our time, at one point the Philippines, and we never allowed them to represent themselves by any measure. So, that's kind of a null point to me because every country has done that at some point, including the United States, 100 years after we wrote the Declaration of Independence. We'll move past that one real quick. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness of his invasions of the rights of the people. Now, this one is one that you could say is pretty bad on the surface, but when you think about it, it's not really. Because if the United States government saw that the city of Detroit, for example, started to elect government officials that outright were declaring we should overthrow the American government, the American government will most likely step in, and regardless whether it seems right or not, they would dissolve that. They would dissolve the city government, most likely, and call a re-election or have these people arrested for treason. And so what the British did there, especially with the House of Burgesses, I considered to be completely appropriate at the time. The British government the British government is not supposed to be allowing a people a right to say, let's overthrow the government. The U.S. government doesn't even allow people to do that these days. You can be put in prison for that kind of talk. But we're not going to address all of them. That's something that we could do in a whole other video. But I wanted to kind of address this real quick. And a lot of their, I guess you could say, points that they brought up in the Declaration of Independence, I just don't really see where they were coming from. Especially this one, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. But we won't cover that. We'll cover that for another time, maybe in a video. But I thank you very much for the support. Well, not really the support, but I thank you very much for bringing that up, and I hope that kind of weighs in on my opinions on the Declaration of Independence and some of their points, because a lot of things that the Founding Fathers pointed out in the Declaration of Independence here is stuff we do these days in one form or another, and so I kind of consider it the fault of a government in all countries that everyone endeavors in these kinds of, I guess you could say, faults to one degree or another. And so with that, we are on to the next question.
All right. And next up, we have a question from William Allen, who puts in a $20 super chat and says, that's because the Americans realize that rights come from God, sure as hell not from the government.
Thank you very much for the support, William Allen. And I would have to agree that democracy is a far better form of governments, in my opinion, than a constitutional monarchy. I can't agree. And while I don't really see the points that the Revolutionary War started for, I do like the end results. They are of course wonderful, and that's why the United States is the way it is, and that's why I can have the aspirations and the pursuit of becoming the president of the United States, which I still think is one of the finest and best countries in the world. Sure, it has its faults, but it has many things to be proud for. And so I would have to agree. Now here's something interesting about the, well, I'm about to go on so many political sides tonight, but what's interesting about the Enlightenment is that, surprisingly, a lot of them were kind of moving away from the incredibly religious aspect of it. And this is something, now I discredit a lot of what college says because the college classes can have a decent slant to them. But considering that these classes were based off of primary sources written by some of the founding fathers and I guess you could say the philosophers of the Enlightenment, it was very interesting to see that a lot of them weren't really into the idea of God as the Christian God. Much like Sir Isaac Newton said, they started to view God as like the clockmaker. He made a machine that works by perfect principles, and it may not be the Christian God, which I found really weird and kind of made me start to think a little bit more about the founding fathers and where they were in their mindset. But still, they did bring about a incredible democracy, the first of its kind in the world at this point in history. Of course, the Roman Republic and the, I guess you could say the Greek democracy existed, of course, thousands of years before, but in the modern world, the United States was the first of its kind, then quickly followed by the short-lived French Republic, and also the Swiss Confederation, which, in my opinion, may have one of the best forms of democracy we can see practiced today, and I think that a lot can be learned from the Swiss, kind of getting into my opinions, a lot can be learned from the Swiss, which, surprisingly, they learned how to make a democracy directly off of how the United States had implemented ours, and then they added a little bit of extra stuff to it. But I hope that does address the comment, William Allen, and I can agree that I would say that the rights of man definitely come from a higher power like God, more so than just the government itself. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much for the support.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from BMLUTAH, who says, "Great job, guys. I'm glad you're standing up for Ukraine."
And thank you so much for the support. And of course, we've been standing up for Ukraine since the start, and we're going to continue standing for them until this war is over. And so thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from Charles Watson, who says, "Do you think the lubricant factory fire effects, let's see here. I'm a longtime viewer and can't wait to see what you guys do in the future."
Let's see. To answer the lubricant factory, I just think the fire is going to be damaging a lot of their lubricants, which, while a lot of people don't think about that, there is a lot of lubricants required to keep things working. Of course, to keep tank gears turning, to keep guns firing, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And so I think that will affect that for sure. And I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy the channel. And we're going to keep this thing running as best we can. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have another $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, "I still have both of my DS uniforms as well as my fight gear. Whoop! Wish I had all the stuff I collected for the USAF Museum."
And I thank you so much for the support. And I always think it's cool when veterans keep their uniforms. It's always something that I think is important because it kind of tells your legacy and your story to your kids. And also, it keeps a little bit of history alive because a lot of people never think about it, but it's always the sentimental kind of folks who just keep their uniforms around and then die and then pass them on in great condition to their family. And that's the only way we're able to see history kind of how it was. In most museums, the uniforms that they have on display were kept by families until they were donated to that museum. So I thank you so much for preserving your uniforms. I hope you continue to preserve them so that way people in the future can see the exact kind of uniforms you wore during your time. And so thank you so much for the support, and I hope that answers the question. And also, real quick, just to answer one thing with William Allen, he caught me there. I do have to agree. I kind of said this wrong. The United States isn't a democracy; it's a republic. It's a federal republic, but still, it's kind of in that degree. I kind of feel like it's kind of like hair splitting. And I'm not disagreeing with you, William Allen. It's definitely a constitutional republic, but I feel like that almost gets into that whole argument with communism, where someone's like, "Oh, it's not like real communism; it's Marxism or Maoism or something like that." It's still communism in a form, just a different shade of it, and that's kind of how I feel with most democracies. Is that while it may be a federal republic or a semi-direct democracy or a constitutional monarchy, which is still a form of especially in the British form, it's definitely a democracy these days for the large part. I still just kind of like bundle them all up into the democracy tag, but still, you are correct. It is a constitutional republic. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a very generous $50 super chat from Terry R. Put it in reverse, Terry. He said, "First time chat, greetings from Blighty. We're not so bad. Most places still connected to us are doing pretty well, and Slava Ukraine."
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I've always heard Blighty, and I might be dumb, but Blighty England, I gotta pull it up. Hang on. Blighty is an English slang term for Great Britain. I knew it had to have been talking about the whole country. Goodness. I'm sorry. I should have known that because I've always heard people saying, "You're going to go to Blighty." And, it's just always been a thing. But I've never thought that it was specifically all of England. I always thought it was kind of like a slang term for Brighton or something because it kind of sounds like it. But I thank you so much for the support. And, yeah, Britain's not a bad place. Now, I joke about Britain a lot, but that's honestly because I like Britain a whole load, and also I think British people are fairly nice people. We've been over there a good bit. Let's see, Britain, there we go. It's a beautiful country. There's all kinds of beautiful places in it. Not to give y'all all a sales pitch, but the Cotswolds is pretty, but there's many pretty things. The North Wessex area of natural beauty is just amazing. Go anywhere in Cornwall, beautiful. The Dartmoors is a really cool place to go. I'm honestly a huge fan of Snowdonia and the Peak District, and also I'm a huge fan of the Yorkshire Dales. That was incredibly beautiful. Never went to the Lake District, though. But yes, it's an incredible place. Beautiful place. There's, of course, good places and bad places, but with everywhere, nothing can be perfect. And I don't fault y'all for that. I still think it's an impressive country, and it has its own special little nice qualities about it that makes it British. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, Terry, and I'm glad that you were able to let us put a little bit of light on Britain for a second. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Jose Rano, who says, Enforcer, check tracking point scope video. That is the kind of AR you want. Mine is an AR-10 with thermal scope and night vision.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, Jose, and I think you may be talking about that thermal scope we saw earlier. And so if you are, we are going to check that out, but sadly, I don't do a lot of modifications to my guns. You know, like, whenever I get a gun, I just use the iron sights. I don't know why, but I always kind of, I don't know, I'm just not really a scope person for some reason. That's just kind of like my personal preference. But I thank you so much for the support. I am going to check it out. And also, that is really cool to hear you got an AR-10. That is really neat. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support, Jose.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Louise Salmeron, who says, thank you for keeping your support for Ukraine and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Louis Salmeron. Sorry, I mispronounced that there. But thank you so much for the support. And we're going to keep the support for Ukraine rolling until the end of the war. And so with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And moving on, we have an $8 super chat from Stefan R. and a $5 super chat from Mia Story, who did not leave comments, but thank you very much for your support to the channel. And up next, we have another super chat from William Allen, who puts in a $5 donation this time and says, I got my light olive LSA t-shirt today. We need an emblem for the LSA.
Did you just say LSAT?
LSA t-shirt.
It sounded like you said, I just got my LSAT shirt. Like it was like the LSAT. I was like, what? I was like, well, thank you very much for the support, William Allen. And I'm glad you got one because I honestly thought you were really cool looking. And I made sure to get one for myself as well. And so with that, thank you once again so much for the support, William Allen. And also, thank you so much for having some interesting talking points to bring up. And I know that we kind of, I don't know if we really disagree or agree tonight. We've had a really interesting discussion on the Revolutionary War and kind of like the start and causes and the reasons of it that we saw, you know, of course, in history. But still, thank you so much for the support and enjoying this channel so much. And it is interesting to talk about such things, kind of off the war a little bit, like the American Revolution War and why it started. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time talking tonight, but please bear with me, everyone, because for some reason my lips are not working with my brain tonight. It's kind of weird. I think it's because I had a little bit too much coffee. But with that, thank you once again for the support, William Allen. I hope you enjoy that shirt, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $5 super chat from William Allen, who says, Morse code, folks, were called Diddy Bops in the Air Force, A1C at Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi, 1975. Whoop.
Hey, well, that's really cool. But I've been around Keesler.
No doxing.
Yeah, no doxing there, no doxing. But I've been around Keesler, and that's a pretty neat place. I actually saw an air show there years ago. So, thank you so much for the support. And that is really cool to hear that you were around Keesler in '75. I want to share a lot of information with you, but due to doxing reasons, we're not. But I thank you so much for the support. And that is really cool to hear they were called Diddy Pops back in the day. That sounds like Bill Cosby's pudding pops, you know. But
Yeah.
we are on to the next one, and thank you so much for sharing an interesting little tidbit of information with us about what Morse code, I guess you could say, writers were called. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, let me give a shout out to Zion and Miroslav Kostic for putting in a $5 donation each. Thank you very much to both of you for your support. And moving on, we have a $5 super chat from Tim CNZ, who says, "Hey guys, great work as usual. Regarding the L119s, the training of the Ukrainians was partly done by the NZ Army. The L119 is the NZ Army's only towed artillery, hence the expertise."
And I thank you so much for the support, Tim. And also, I thank you for giving credit to the New Zealanders, which I did not give credit to earlier. They have been in Britain and also been helping to train these Ukrainians on the L119. I believe, if we had to say where they were trained, most likely on the Salisbury Plain, which is just north of the Stonehenge. And as far as I know, it's one of the largest and most commonly used artillery training ranges in the area. When we actually went to Stonehenge one time, which, by the way, is kind of a disappointing landmark. I hate to say it, Britain's got a million things that it should be proud for, but Stonehenge, in my opinion, it just wasn't impressive. I mean, there's really no other way for me to explain it. Let's see. Hang on. Let me take a moment here real quick to share some stories here about Stonehenge. So we went to Stonehenge. And let me get you down here. Surprisingly enough, it's right near a road that's actually pretty heavily traveled. You can even see on Google Maps at the time of day it took the satellite picture. It's got a lot of cars on it that look identical. Kind of weird. Well, these are different, but still. So near a heavily traveled road, you get here, and you can't get near the stones because they're scared people are going to chip away at them like they used to. But let me pop you all down right here. When you see them, they're not tall. They're about maybe 14 feet tall stones. They're maybe about 3.5 feet wide. That's just not as impressive as you'd imagine it to be. And the country, well, the busy road here in the background kind of takes away from what you would expect it to be when National Geographic shows it to you on TV. Because they never show that, and they always make this place look empty. But another interesting thing is that you can't get there by foot. You have to take a bus because the visitor center is so far away. And it was so hot when we went there that someone fell out right here. Wait, let me put this down here on the ground if I can. This is going to bring back memories for Matthew and me. But someone fell out right here in the grass, right in this exact spot. Just fell out onto the ground, like just fell like a sack of bricks. And so they were standing there pretty much dying of heat stroke on the ground because it was so hot that day. And so a British person came over and got a water bottle. This person was laying on their back with their mouth wide open trying to breathe, and this person starts
waterboarded.
Yeah, this person takes the water bottle, starts pouring it right on their face. Water's pouring down their mouth. They can hardly breathe. Water's pouring down their nose, and this person is drowning on the ground. And this person has the audacity to say, "Are you okay?" This person is
Are you okay?
Yeah, this person was waterboarded and drowning on the ground, and I just remember that from Stonehenge. It was burning hot that day, and we finally made it out there to Stonehenge. We're kind of disappointed by it, and all the smoke was billowing over the Stonehenge area. It was white, thick, well, not white, thick smoke, but it was decently thick. And we asked the tour guide guy, because we heard thunder in the distance, but it was a perfectly sunny day. We were like, is there a storm coming around or a fire or something? What's going on? He said, no, the Salisbury Plain is just north of y'all, and they're having artillery practice there today. And we were like, what? And that's when we found out that this is one of the most commonly used artillery ranges in the UK. But I hope that is a funny little story for y'all to hear. One of our fun stories from our trips to Britain, which were so fun. It was a neat country to visit, and I'd highly recommend, if any of y'all ever travel internationally, Britain is one of the best places to go. And there's also this funny little kind of like love-hate relationship in between the British and the Americans. You can usually joke around with it pretty well, make jokes in their country, they'll make jokes on ours, and it's just a fun time all around. But with that, I hope that kind of does weigh in on the Salisbury Plain a little bit, and also a huge credit to the New Zealanders once more for training those Ukrainians on those artillery pieces, most likely at the Salisbury Plain. And so with that, we're moving on to the next question, and I thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, I want to recognize a $5 super chat from Christopher Liu, a $4 super chat from Dupper Bob, as well as a $3 donation from R. May and Raquel8. They don't leave comments, but as always, we appreciate the support, and thank you so much for supporting the channel. And moving on, we have a $5 super chat from Colton Burge, who says, can you Google search October 8th, 2020, Boris Johnson and Zelensky also search Black Sea mosquito fleet and talk about it and show us what you find.
Let's see here. We'll pull that up real quick. Black Sea mosquito pit. A mosquito. What? It was Black Sea mosquito fleet.
Yes.
Mosquito. So here's the Black Sea mosquito fleet. The UK will help Ukraine regain its naval footing. I hate to say this, but we are starting to get a little pressed for time. So sadly, I don't think we'll be able to look into this one a little bit too much, but it appears to be smaller boats. And I think that may be a little bit of help to the Ukrainians, but once again, the smaller boats facing up against the Russian Navy, while the Russian Navy is highly incompetent, I don't think that would turn out well. What was the other thing they wanted us to pull up?
Boris Johnson and Zelensky.
Boris Johnson and Zelensky. And what was that date they gave us?
October 8th, 2020.
Let's see here. Prime Minister meeting with President Zelensky, 8th of October, 2020. The Prime Minister met Ukrainian. Well, we're going to try and speed read this. On trade, Prime Minister increased trade. Prime Minister stressed reform and rule of law. And on defense, Prime Minister to grant Ukraine. He offered UK's support to Ukraine to make progress on defense and security reforms. Two leaders discussed Russia's malign influence both in Ukraine and the wider region. They also expressed their shared concern about the situation in Belarus. The Prime Minister outlined the steps the UK had taken in response to human rights abuses in the country, including the imposition of sanctions. The Prime Minister and the President resolved to cooperate closely on the response to coronavirus. The Prime Minister underlined the importance of the COVAX scheme as a way to pool global efforts to develop a vaccine and encourage Ukraine to join. They also agreed to work together to tackle the shared threat from global change, particularly ahead of the COP26 summit in Glasgow. Welcome to BBC News. But anyways, moving on from that, it does seem that's actually really interesting. We can see in 2020 that the sitting government of the United Kingdom, of course led by Boris Johnson, was already pro-Ukrainian and trying to make great strides to get Ukraine into NATO and also improve their trade status with the rest of Europe. So thank you very much for bringing that up. I didn't actually know that that meeting had happened, and it's interesting to see that the British actually have a long-running history, even before this war started, of having these kinds of stances and ideas in cooperation with the Ukrainians. And so with that, we're going to really... I'm looking through the live chat. A lot of people like the accent. That was crazy. I thought it was kind of bad. But anyways, we're going to move on to the next one. And I thank you so much for the support and for pointing out those two things. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have another $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, I was working on history of the enlisted force and the 52 different trades needed to fill out aero squadrons in World War I. I was tracing the evolution of from 1917 to the present of the jobs. Cyber called.
Well, thank you so much for the support, William Allen. And it's really cool to hear that you've actually been looking at the... Let's see, working on a history of enlisted forces and the 52 different trades needed to fill out the aero squadrons in World War I. And that's actually something I honestly have to tell you, I know a decent amount about World War I, at least in terms of the army and the infantry. But one thing I certainly know very little about is the aero squadrons of World War I for the U.S. Army Signal Corps, because I believe it was still under the Signal Corps at that time, and they hadn't created the Air Corps. But that would be something, honestly, that I would be interested to read about in the future. And I think that's really a cool historical endeavor by you. And I hope that someone has written something about that out there, so that way it's a little bit easier. But that would be really cool, actually. A really cool idea to write a book about the evolution of the U.S. air squads from 1917, well, really 1909 when the Army got their first plane, from 1909 all the way up to the present day, because I think that would be interesting to show the evolution of doctrine, ability, and also the size, and I guess you say the funding that the Army Signal Corps, the Air Corps, and then the Air Force got over time. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, William Allen, and sharing that with us. I think that's a really cool little endeavor you got going right there. And so with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 super chat from Suzanne B, who jumps on the Duncan VR train of the sheep thing and says, for Ba lessons at at University for Enforcer Matt.
Well, thank you very much for your support. And Matthew's hardly doing that anymore, but still, it's pretty funny. And so, thank you once again for the support. I hope that has made you happy. And we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Mr. Lunchtime, who donates more of his lunch money. Very generous of you, Mr. Lunchtime. He says, "It's raining tacos, out in the street, tacos, all you can eat. Great work, my friends. It's Taco Tuesday. Tacos on me and my prodigal son, TacoBot 3000.
Well, thank you so much for the support, Mr. Lunchtime. We're going to make sure to get some tacos. Just to let y'all know, just in case we have any FSB agents watching, the best way to poison Matthew is to poison him through the fish tacos. He loves them. Right, Matthew?
And now if they actually poison me through fish tacos, I'm going to be coming after you.
Well, I mean, like, to make it fair, everyone already knows I love pizza, and that'd probably be the best way to poison me. But anyways, he loves fish tacos, Mr. Lunchtime, and so I know he's definitely going to get some fish tacos with that. So I thank you so much for the support. And also, it is interesting to hear that you have an apprentice in the chat. We'll be interested in hearing about him in the future. And as Emperor Palpatine once said in Star Wars, "I will be watching your career with great interest." And I did that one terribly. But anyways, thank you so much for the support, and we're on to the next one.
And for the final super chat of the night, just making sure this is the last one, and it is. It's a $5 donation from Jack Turner, who says, "Enforcer, I'm curious why you think the Ukrainians have made it to the outskirts of Kherson. Every analyst has the front line at least 20 kilometers from the city."
We are not, they're not on the outskirts of Kherson. This front line is not entirely accurate, and I have made that clear a couple of times before, but I understand I haven't made that clear often, so sorry about that. But to explain why it's this close, we have gotten a picture before from about the area of somewhere around Mykolaiv. And we've seen a picture from Ukrainian forces actually showing the buildings of Kherson in the distance, and it appeared to be about 7 to 9 kilometers away. And so that's why our front line is this close. It's probably not that close, but still the Ukrainians have gotten close enough that they've been able to take pictures of Kherson city from a distance where you can tell that they're getting rather close, just miles away. So with that, I hope that does answer the question as to why our front line's so close. But as far as we know, and as far as a lot of experts, which, they are what they are, but a lot of experts do say the front line's further back, but we're not entirely sure. So just take it with a grain of salt with this front line. It's based off of what we've seen before, but it may not be entirely accurate. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, due to time constraints, we're going to answer 3 live chat questions tonight, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, what is the first live chat question?
And first up, we have a live chat question from Pakatang, who says, "Enforcer, what responsibility do the Russian people have for this war, and how can countries avoid making the mistakes that the Russian people made?"
A great question. I would honestly have to say that the accountability of the average Russian citizen, it's kind of a mixed opinion with me, because while a lot of them have shown that they have disdain for the war and do not support it, a decent amount also support the war. And so it's really hard to say if they're accountable or not. I would say by and large they're not, because Putin's been in power for so long that there's really no way that anyone in Russia right now has had a say in these affairs and these events that have kind of happened within the previous few months. And so I would largely have to err on the side of the average Russian citizen does not really have a huge deal of responsibility in this war. I would more put it towards the government and the Russians who directly support the government, not really all of them. And can you reread that last part that wasn't that specific question, Matthew?
They said, how can countries avoid making the same mistakes that the Russian people have made?
There's really no way to avoid those kinds of mistakes, because everyone's always talking about, oh my God, like how could the Germans vote Hitler in, in the 30s? But the thing is that we've seen a lot of people get voted in like that all over the world since then. I'm not. Listen, that's not an American political comment. I'm just going to make that clear. I'm talking about actual genocidal maniacs around the world. Hitler wasn't the only one. There was a lot of other ones out there. I don't. That's kind of a bit of a stretch. I was about to say Pol Pot in Burma, but that's not really the same. But still, there's really no way to do that because people are people. People err a lot, and so there's really no way to really learn from these mistakes. And that kind of sounds a little nihilistic, but so far I've seen that the human behavior over the course of history, over thousands of years, has never changed, and I don't think it ever will. And so the same pitfalls we were falling victim to thousands of years ago, we'll fall victim to until the end of time, I believe. And so sadly, I don't really think there's anything that countries can learn off of what the people of Russia or anyone through history has done, because I've never seen anyone learn from it yet. And so with that, I hope I've answered your question, at least my, I guess you could say, philosophy on it. And with that, we are on to the final question of tonight. So who is the lucky last person who threw in that lucky last question?
All right. So the viewer is Mark, who says the question that has to be asked: can Putin prolong this war for the next months, years, given their current isolation, and hold off Ukraine? Difficult one without heavy support for Ukraine.
Excellent question. And I've answered this one several times before, but it's a great one to answer. The Russians, if they mismanage everything, which they're doing at the moment, they could only last for a couple of more months. I would give them about 4 more months maybe, and then they'll probably collapse. However, if they are able to manage everything fairly well, and the Chinese or other countries start to step up and try and support the Russians, they could start to last a decent while. They could last years. And sadly, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't really give you an exact answer on when I think the war will end. And I see a lot of quote-unquote experts doing that out there, and I think that's abusing their, faux title of being an expert pretty much at this point, because an expert ought to know, and I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I'm saying real experts ought to know that there's really no way to predict when these wars will end, and if they're doing that, they're a charlatan who's trying to pose as a know-it-all, because there's no way to really know when this war will end. There's so many variables at play in the background that could change how much longer this war lasts by months or years maybe, that we can't really account for right now because the future hasn't written itself yet. So sadly, I can't really give you a straight answer, like a specific answer, as to how much longer they'll last, but it's going to be in between months and a couple of years. And so with that, I hope that's answered the question, and we have reached the end of the stream for the night. It's been quite a long one, 3 hours and 12 minutes long, one of the longer ones we've done recently, but I hope you all have enjoyed it, because I certainly have. I've been able to talk about all kinds of things, ranging from the war to the American Revolution, and also Army Aero Corps, kind of like in the earlier times of history. And so I've really enjoyed all of it, and I thank you all so much for bringing up interesting questions and enjoying this news. And of course, all of the support y'all have given us, as it helps us to keep on running this channel. And so with that, I hope to see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine on day 154. And also, if you are new to the stream, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We run these streams every single day of the week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and we also upload daily summaries on the war, and are planning on trying to expand our news and our information coverage to even broader topics in the future. So that way, if you enjoy the Ukraine war streams, you can enjoy even more stuff on different things, to make it sound very technical. And so with that, thank you all once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great night, stay safe, and slwo Ukraini.